numbers in terms of the differential analysis, making a decision, and then also the projected statements that you would have seen there. So that's more or less the plan. Question for everyone, using the yes or no feature in the chat, do you guys want to make this interactive? Do you want me to get participation from you? And then not like, we'll say totally like class style, but somewhat. And then I can give feedback based on what I'm hearing of like, oh yeah, Matt, that sounds great. Or, maybe you could improve it a little bit by adding X, Y, Z. So maybe just using the yes or no. Yes means like, yes, you would like to participate. And then no means you would just like me to go through it all. So if you go to the bottom right, there's like a react button. And then you can do it like that, I think. So I've got 37 people here and 2 answers. You know what? I've already seen enough thumbs up. I've made my decision. Let's hear from you guys. It's going to be the most beneficial like that. I also am going to get tired of hearing my own voice for a few hours, and I'd rather hear your guys' thoughts. So I think that's the best way to make this as productive as possible. What I want to start with is how to read the case. And actually, before you even get that, I want to launch a poll. How long did the case take you? Did it take you less than 4 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, or more than 5 hours? All right, congratulations. 2 people would have finished the exam. 3 people would have finished the exam on time. A few people were taking a little bit longer. To be honest, that doesn't concern me right now. That doesn't concern me yet, because you're still learning the process. You're still learning how to formulate your ideas, learning how to tackle this as a comprehensive case. And like I said in the instructions, that's not a huge issue if it's taking you more than 4 hours now. However, your exam's in about 10 days. It's got to get to under 4 hours within the next few days, within the next week. That's a major weakness on this exam every year, is that students don't finish. I gave you a lot of information in this case. That was intentional. My goal was to see, could you sort through what is important and what is not important? You don't have to talk about every statistic that's given. Again, that's part of the thought process when I was writing it, is like, I'm just gonna try to drown you in information and see if you can pull out the most important things. So you don't have to talk about everything. I'll give you a hint. That business size up is probably not worth as much as you think. Maybe if everyone could write in the chat, how long did you spend on industry, consumer, corporate capabilities, and competitors? Just write in the chat how long you spent. All right. This seems pretty decent. I think on this case, I think anywhere plus or minus 40 minutes, no longer than that. Because if you're spending too long on this, you don't have time for the rest of it. Seen answers 45 minutes, 30 minutes, 35, 35, 45, 45, 40, 40, an hour, 50, 30. I think around 30 to 40 minutes is appropriate. Because if you're spending too much time on that size up, you're not giving yourself enough time to complete everything else on the case, because you saw there's a decent amount of things that you need to do, especially with the financials. I'm going to show you how I read a case. Can you guys see my screen? Perfect. I love marking up my cases in the margins. You'll notice I don't have any highlights here. And if I'm highlighting, it's because I was highlighting my own notes. This is very intentional. You don't want to have a case full of highlights. Because if you have a case full of highlights, you can't really pull out what's important if you have to go back to a section and reread it. So my advice to you is I always start with this at the top. The role, the time, the decision, and where we are. That's framing my whole analysis of the rest of the case. Every single case I've ever done in IB or in 2257 or other courses, I always started with this part up here. It's really helpful to know who you are, what is your decision, you could even put your goals there, and you're linking everything back to that. Takes what? 30 seconds, a minute to do it, and then you're framing your thoughts. Then what I like to do is I like to read the introduction to the case and the conclusion to the case. The introduction is going to help you understand what industry you're in, what the decision is. The conclusion to the case is going to help you understand what is required. If I pull up the case I have my other notes here, you can see it's filled with everything written in the margins. So if I read out the introduction with everyone here, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, it says, in June 2021, Jack and Susan, co-founders of Smith Wines, were assessing their options after a year of global turbulence due to the COVID. Now I know COVID's a big factor. SW is a winery located in Kelowna, British Columbia, that hosted patrons for tours and wine tasting and distributed wine across Western Canada. Nice, we're going to be talking about wine all day. After several successful entrepreneurial ventures, the Smiths began their venture into viticulture when they started SW in 2015. We're now a business that's 6 years old. That's relevant. Every piece here is relevant. The married couple had deep ties to the region that they took great pride in operating a business in Kelowna. After several years of profitable operations, they thought about how they could grow SW in the future. The business currently ran out of their family-owned home. There was a 1,200 square foot, 3-bay garage attached to a 14,500 square foot home. As SW continued to grow, they wondered if and how they should build a new production facility and wine tasting area down the road on another property that the Smith family owned. Now I know that we're operating out of our own home, we're operating out of the pretty massive garage. We already own the other facility down the road. Should we think about expanding? The couple also wondered if adding a restaurant to the new facility would be a worthwhile investment. Now I have my thoughts framed. It's June 2021. COVID is a factor. We've been a business for 6 years. Our decision is, should we build a new production facility? And if we do build that new production facility, should we also add a restaurant? Now I have that framed, who we are, where we located, what are we trying to decide to do? That's the first thing I always do, read the introduction. Now what I do is I then go to the conclusion. And if we read out the conclusion, it says, given the trends in the wine industry, Jack and Susan had to decide what was next for their company. They were excited about the prospect of cementing their future in the Kelowna wine industry. However, were worried about some of the long-lasting implications of COVID. The couple wondered if now was the time to build a new facility, and if they did choose to build a facility, if they should also expand into the restaurant industry. Whichever decision they made, it would need to align with their goals. Before making any decision, the Smiths wanted to analyze the company's past performance and cash flows, so that they could apply these key trends to SW's strategic direction. They plan to project an income statement and balance sheet for the 2021 fiscal period, whether they opted for the winery and restaurant, or to continue operations as is. They knew a detailed action plan and contingency plan would be integral to the company's success. The couple uncorked another bottle, Now I know I need to analyze my past performance. I have to analyze the statement of cash flows. You already know that you have to do that. And it tells me I have to project statements. As soon as I read that I have to project statements, I am changing my time allocation. For me to project a financial statement myself probably takes 10 to 15 minutes. For you guys, probably somewhere around double that. Now you need to allocate 30 minutes to the projected statements somewhere in your personal time budget. That's how I start every case, reading the introduction, then reading the conclusion. Then what I'll do is I'll go to the exhibits. Sorry, let me erase the markings real quick. So I go to the exhibits and I immediately see, okay, here's my former statement of earnings. We're definitely going to talk about that today, 100%. I go to the statement of financial position. And I have my balance sheet from the last 3 years. I'm almost 100% you're guaranteed to see these two exhibits. A statement of earnings, which is your income statement, and also your balance sheet from the last 3 years. Then I go down and I see that there's a statement of cash flows. Did anyone build a statement of cash flows and didn't see this? Okay, and maybe if you did, you just don't want to admit it. Go through the exhibit so you're not wasting your time. Every year on the exam, sometimes they give you the statement of cash flows, sometimes they don't. And every year, if they do give it, there's someone that still builds it because they didn't take the time to go see what's in the exhibits. That's a waste of 15, 20 minutes that you've lost that you can't allocate to other things. So I see that I have my income statement from the past 3 years. I see that I have my balance sheet from the past 3 years. I see that I have my statement of cash flows from the previous 2 years. And I also see that I have my ratios. Once I see all this information, I'm gonna start budgeting my time accordingly. Now I've learned from reading the intro and conclusion that I'm gonna have to do 2 differentials. I've learned that I have to do a projected statements, and I see that they've given me my statement of cash flows and my ratios already. I'm already kind of fixing my internal clock of how long everything's gonna take me on this exam. Every case is different. We can't apply the same framework of timing each time, because if they don't give you the ratios, you gotta budget an extra 5-10 minutes for that. If they don't give you the statement of cash flows, you gotta budget 5-10 minutes for that. If they tell you that you don't have to project statements, now you have a little bit more time. And they also give me this wine sales by channel. Now this is sales. So I might put a little star to this and be like, maybe segment reporting. Maybe. I still don't know, because just with this, I can't do a segment report. But this is maybe hinting to me that I might have to. I don't know yet. And those are all the exhibits. Now I know the information that I'm operating within. I know I'm a winery in Kelowna. I know it's COVID, it's 2021. I know we've been operational for 6 years. We're trying to decide between building a new facility or a new facility in a restaurant. I see that I have to project financial statements. I see that they've given me the statement of cash flows and ratios. I see that they've given me this breakdown of sales. And now I'm trying to fit everything within what I know. Take the 5 minutes to do what I just talked about. It doesn't take that long, but now your mindset is much more clear about what's provided to you and what you might have to use. These exhibits have a lot of information. You want to be paying attention to them. Any questions about what I just talked about there, or does that all make sense? All right, just give you a second. Okay, now for the fun part. What do we need to do today? So, I'll take a little bit away from this. This part here, you know you got to do all this. That's pretty much every time. You always have to analyze those. And sometimes you might have to build it as well. Let's create a few little polls here to bet the next stuff. So let's do another poll. We'll go segment report, or sorry, contribution analysis, yes or no? Segment report, yes or no? And then lastly, cash budget for the future stuff. Yes or no? All right, what do we think? Contribution, segment report, cash budget? See 20 responses, but 36 people in the call. Can you guys see the results of the poll? All right, my 13 stragglers, can you guys answer and then I'll share the results? Okay. So 37% of people said yes to contribution, 63% said no. To be honest, the contribution, like, it does give you a few details in it, but that's not an expectation. I think if you talk a little bit about it in like current operations or something, it's not a big deal. But you were not expected to do a contribution analysis nor break even. That one doesn't concern me because contribution, if you did do it, probably didn't take you very long. Segment report, 57% of people said yes, 43% said no. Someone that said yes, could you share why you thought that we had to do segment report? Today is literally zero risk. I could not care less if you tell me the wrong answer, Jack. But it's in your best benefit to realize why you did not have to do a segment report. Could someone who said no to the segment report tell me why we didn't have enough information to do a segment report? Jack?
I didn't do a segment report because we had the revenue broken down by segment, but I don't think we saw the expenses broken down. So that's why I didn't do it.
That's correct, Jack. You had the revenue broken down by segments, but you did not have the expenses. For you to do a segment report, You need to have the breakdown of everything. So segment reporting was not part of this case. What about cash budgeting? I see 40% said yes, 60% said no. I already know the answer. I'm curious what you guys think. The answer to that one is also no. Why do we not have to do a cash budget, guys? Brock?
I think because you normally do like a cash budget when they're having a hard time dealing with cash, like struggling managing it. Then
So that's part of it. They might give you like a word hint saying, oh, the company was struggling to meet their cash needs. That could be one thing. Jessica?
I didn't do it because it never talked about like the monthly allocation.
That's the main hint, Jessica, is it never talks about the monthly amount. So I really want to highlight what Jessica and Jack both said. In terms of cash budget, you don't have to do it because it doesn't tell it to you by month. It doesn't say, when are you going to pay the like restaurant consultants? When do you pay the salaries? What day do you buy the inventory? When would the construction start and be complete? Like, and how would that be? How would the payments work for the contractors? It doesn't give you enough details there. And going back to what Jack said regarding the segment reporting is it doesn't give you the breakdown of the expenses. That's your hint that if you tried to do it, you were probably making a lot of assumptions. You were probably trying to guess a lot of things that the case wasn't telling you. That's something you have to be cautious about on the exam, is not trying to fit like a circle into a square, because they just don't give you enough information to do those pieces of analysis. Everything in green is what we will be covering today and tomorrow. A few of the things in red, I'll talk about at a high level how you do it and how you know that you'd have to do it. But in this case here, those were not expected of you. Any questions so far about timing of the case, what's involved and what's not? Any uncertainty? You can either send me a message in the chat or you can raise your hand. Yeah, Ashley.
So would you say there's like a rule of thumb, like to put in our cheat sheets, like segment reporting, you only do if you have like this, and that, and like contribution analysis?
Exactly.
But like,
So
what are the
Ashley, help me
things? Do you
out.
mind repeating that?
Sorry, can you repeat that, Ashley?
I said, do you mind repeating like what the things are that we need for each of the like analyses?
Yeah, Jessica, to do a cash budget, what do you need to have?
The monthly like breakouts.
And even more specifically, the inflows of cash by month and the outflows of cash by month. Jack, to do a segment report, what do you need to have?
You need revenue and expenses broken down by like a percentage for each kind of product or segment.
Exactly, you need both the revenues and the expenses. I was a little bit tricky. I gave you the breakdown of revenue because that's useful information to know for the company, but I didn't give you the breakdown of expenses, so you're not expected to do a segment report. To do a contribution, I think is a little bit harder to identify sometimes, because here, like I did give a few details about the contribution margin, but they might say something like they were wondering how many units they would have to sell to cover their fixed costs. Or they might say something like, oh, they weren't sure if they were able to break even. And then that might be your hint as well in the wording. Will there always be one thing from sensitivity analysis, or are there usually a couple of those? In this case, there's none. There's only differentials. The reason why there's none is because it takes a decent amount of time to read the case. and there's projected statements, and the differential was rather lengthy. So every case is pick and choose. They're not all the same in terms of what's required of you. This case here, I would say, is like pretty 50-50 between numbers and qualitative. Your case that you did last week, Adept Chemicals, I'd say is probably closer to like 60% numbers, 40% qualitative. And the case that you're gonna do this week in class, DICOR, is the opposite. It's more qualitative than it is quantitative. All right, any more questions about this framework? This is your guiding tool. You guys have about a week and a bit before the exam. At this point, I would more or less want to know how to do everything on here. And you truly know that you're prepared for this exam when I could say, hey, Ava, how do I do a cash budget? And you talk me through exactly how. How do I do a segment report? You tell me exactly how. And once you can answer that for each one of these tools of analysis, that's when you know that you're fully prepared for the exam. Hopefully today was a little bit of a, could be either one of two cases, with either a wake-up call that, oh shit, I need to figure some things out, or, hey, this is all going pretty well, the way I'm preparing for this makes sense, I feel like I'm on a good track. Either way, that's good feedback for you to know. That's why I decided to do this session this weekend and not next weekend. Because if it was a bit of a wake-up call, you were really struggling through a few points, now you know a little bit better of how to focus your time this next week and where to focus your efforts. All right, any questions about that, or does that make sense? Perfect. If I was thinking of the timing for this case, everyone's different. But I would say reading this case, probably somewhere between like 40 to 60 minutes in total. It takes a while to mark up the case the way that I did. I'm writing a lot of notes, my margins everywhere. This is what your exam should look like. This is what your cases should look like when you're doing them. You should be taking the time to mark it up so that you really understand it. What I don't want you to do is try to read the case as fast as possible, miss some key details, and then like have to go back and reread it, because then you're repeating your work more than once, which is not ideal. So take your time to read it. Business size up, I would say 30 to 40 minutes. Statement of cash flows and ratios, I would also probably say 30 to 40 minutes. So what's that, 2 hours? Differential, maybe like 45 minutes. Decision, 15 minutes. So what's that, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Projected statements, maybe 40 minutes. And action plan, 20 minutes. No, that's too long for action, maybe like 10 minutes. That would be my guideline for this case specifically. Every case is different. I can't tell you what it'll be on your exam, but this is, in my experience, what makes sense. You want to give yourself time to properly be doing all the numbers when you're doing these case analysis. All right, before we get into actually going through the case, any questions about that, or does that all make sense? Your case on Monday, your case for this week is very long as well. I'm not sure if you've done it, but it's even longer than this case. So if you were struggling with timing, that's where you have to adjust accordingly. And the case that you do this week, I would want it to take like maybe just over 4 hours max, but you can't keep taking 5 hours to do this, because if you do 5 hours, there goes this part of the exam. And you do not want to get a 0 on that part of the exam. Every case should start with this. It's helping you frame your thoughts so you understand where you're going with things. Roll. Are those the names of the characters? I think so. Yeah, Jack and Susan. Why is it significant that they're the co-founders? Why do you think that's relevant information when we're going through this, that we're Jack and Susan Smith and not, I don't know, Raphael, an accountant that works for them? Why is that significant of who they are? Jivan,
For equity reasons.
keep going. What do you mean by equity reasons?
So like how much ownership they have in the company and financing opportunities and where we could look to in the future.
Definitely, so it could influence if we want to take on more investors. Why else does it matter, Dom?
It can also influence like your qualitative analysis, including like your corporate capabilities, because you're obviously very well experienced, and so in terms of your qualitative, that can impact it.
Definitely, and like the winery literally has their name attached to it. If you have your name attached to something, you're probably going to change the way that you make your decisions versus if it's just like a random company. The time is June 2021. COVID is very much a factor. You can't use the knowledge that you have today. You can't use what you know on March 2025 to analyze a case from June 2021. You need to stay within that time period. What are a few of the company's goals? Yeah, Alexa?
It said that they had a long-term goal to have their own like production and tasting facility and to expand distribution internationally.
I think we could like summarize that all of long-term goal to grow. They're not just trying to stay as like a small winery, but they have big visions for the long term. We're gonna want to link stuff back to that. Ava?
A second goal for them was a goal to bring some youth and lower pretentious stereotypes surrounding wine by throwing great parties, making wine, and having a good time.
They want to have fun. Whatever we decide to do, it needs to fit with that core goal. This isn't maybe our typical winery. This isn't like, I don't know, some really fancy looking spot where people are just like only focused on the wine. No, they want to have fun. They want to have parties. They probably want to play loud music. Like you're going to fit your analysis to that. Dom?
Could you also say like continue their family legacy in a sense, and like because in Kelowna, I don't know.
100%. This isn't just some like brand that they just bought and they're trying to sell. This is a winery that's on land that they've had for like, I think it's like 100+ years. And the winery is also attached to their name. All of this provides context into our situation and how we're going to analyze and think about what we're going to do here. You want to be tying it back to these points throughout the case. And ultimately, I mean, everyone should be able to answer this. What are our decision points? Yeah, Zaina?
They want to decide if they're going to build a new production facility. And then also if they build the facility, then they want to add a restaurant as well.
Exactly. This is what every single one of yours case should look like at the very beginning. You have your role, time, goals, decision. If you guys are planning to go to Ivy, same idea. Every case you ever do, you're always starting with this and you're framing everything back in this context because it provides you a lot of information about how to do this. Any questions so far? Does that all make sense? I need like a little bit of feedback, guys, like whether it's like a little head nod, a little thumbs up, give me like a reaction. I can't just read blank expressions. Thank you. Okay, seems like it makes sense. Now, the order that Jivan, is that a question?
Can you repeat what you said for the equity part? My headphones cut out when you're
For
giving
which
your
part?
for the part I gave my analysis on.
Yeah, about the equity, that's very relevant that this is a family-owned company. Because it's a family-owned company, are they gonna be so inclined to go issue equity to random investors? Probably not, the way that maybe a public company or someone else might be able to raise equity in a much easier fashion.
Okay.
We'll come back to that idea mainly when we get to ratios and statement of cash flows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, the order that I always like to go through my business size up is industry, competitors, customers, and then corporate capabilities. By the way, guys, how is my speed right now? Am I giving you time to write down notes? Am I going too fast, too slow? Is everything good? Okay, thank you. If at any point I'm going too fast, too slow, you could just even send me a private message in the chat. I try to adjust accordingly, but of course, it's what matters to you guys the most. The reason I like to go through it in this specific order every time is I like to kind of work outwards and then inwards. I first want to know what's going on in the market as a whole. What's going on with just the industry. Then I like to see what are our competitors doing, who are we trying to, work against. Then I'm looking at our consumers about who are our customer groups. And then lastly, I'm looking at our corporate capabilities and seeing how do we fit within that whole landscape. Read the whole case before starting to create these points of analysis. Because you might read something on page 6 that changes the way that you think about something on page 2. You can't just read the industry and start writing it. To make really strong points, you're always making connections to other parts of the case about what's going on. All right, industry, who wants to start? And I guess before you start, I'm going to give you a bit of feedback on the way that I'm looking to develop these points. I want little case fact, mainly what you're making out of it. So who wants to start? Probably give you a little bit of feedback after, but that's all incredibly helpful to you writing an even better exam in a week and a half from now. So let's start with the industry. What's going on in the wine industry? Yeah, Vaish, start us off.
In the Canadian wine, yeah, Vaish.
Vaish?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
In the Canadian wine market itself, we learned in the case that 65% of the revenue is generated by European brands. And Smith Wines is not a European brand, so that means that we could have some trouble and face some difficulties competing with the popular and well-established brands that are coming from Europe.
So, I like where you're starting with it, but I don't think you fully finished that idea. Because you're right, 65% of brands are in Europe. We're a Canadian brand. And that's even further seen by like almost no exports by Canadian wine brands internationally. That means if we're gonna try to compete, we have to really maximize our experience. And having a new and bigger facility might help us achieve that. Because in terms of like pure wine quality, we're not going to be able to compete with the likes of France and Italy and Spain and some of those old world countries. Rock?
My case fact was that like basically the CAGR for the industry is growing and national income is increasing. And I said this is like a positive catalyst for more disposable income for people to spend, so that the industry is growing and that there's a larger market size for us to capture, making it that like in terms of it being a good time for us to expand right now because of the good environmental conditions.
So what I liked about that point, Rock, is that you're taking the case fact, you're saying how it fits with our decisions, you're saying, hey, now might actually be a good time for us to expand. I think when we look at the overall growth is almost non-existent. Like wine is a pretty mature industry. But in terms of what the future opportunities, if we're looking for another revenue source, maybe we have to think about doing something different. Is it Zaina?
It's Zaina, yeah.
Zaina?
So historically there's been poor weather conditions like the cold spell in January 2020, which led to like damaging of lots of the grapes and the crops. That in combination with the fact that the process of actually like fermenting and like manufacturing the wines can take like 3 months to several years. That's a huge consideration, specifically because we're considering expansion. So we have to consider that if we're expanding, we need to stock up on our inventory so we don't run into shortages later on.
Fantastic. I'm going to keep going on that point for a second. Is that something that we have control over in terms of the weather and the crops and the yield? Do we have control over that or no?
Not at all.
Not at all. This is like, when I wrote this case, I learned that the wine industry is really glorified farming. It's not a sexy industry. It's hard, it's difficult. You might not have control over some of these things that impact you, and thus it causes a lot of issues. I think to even make that point stronger, Zaina, you can make a connection to some financial tools. On our income statement, in our costs, that's a huge cost that we don't have much control over. The good news is that's something that affects every winemaker. But to really get that to an A+ level point, I would like to see the connection back to the income statement with the costs. Make sense?
Yeah, would you say that's like a strong thing to consider for like any point? Like if you can relate any qualitative thing to a financial statement, always try and do that?
I wouldn't say always, because you don't want to get to the point of being too repetitive. Like you don't always want to link it to your decision. You don't always want to link it to a goal. You don't always want to link it to a financial tool. But in general, if you're choosing one of those things, that's how you're writing really good analysis.
Okay, and sorry, could you repeat what you connected it to on the income statement?
In your point specifically, your cost of goods sold.
Okay, and then you also addressed that like even though it's an issue for our company, like every single winery faces the same problem.
Exactly, because you want to know, like, is it a me problem or is it like an all of us problem?
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. Jessica?
I just have a question regarding going back to the statements. Do we have to get specific numbers, like say the actual number value, or just kind of make a general analysis?
So in this point here, I would just be looking for a general analysis. Once we get to our statement of cash flows and ratio analysis, we'll really dive into it. But I think a lot of people forget this is an accounting and finance course. Like, tell me the good accounting and finance details of how we can use this for our decisions. Anything else in the industry analysis that we want to talk about? Yeah, Abby?
Okay, so in the case, it was talking about how the restaurant market is really competitive and has really thin margins. It said that like 80% of restaurants close in 5 years and 60% in one, I think. So I said that like adding a restaurant could be really risky, and while it may like enhance the overall like visitor experience, it kind of exposed us to potential loss like with that new segment.
Absolutely. And I like that last point, Abby, where you're kind of making that connection back to the financials again of saying it could expose us to potential losses. I think to even add more context to it, you could even bring in the COVID point there and say, is there a chance our restaurant will be fully shut down and we can't even operate it for a while? Good stuff. Any other points in the industry analysis that we want to talk about? Jack?
Yeah, so I talked about like with the uncertainty of COVID and all the restrictions that have been that have been put in place that is like shutting down the wineries. I said they should heavily consider if they can operate at these lower numbers and stay kind of afloat with their numbers, and as well, if they will be able to pay off these large investments if they want to expand, especially with these new restrictions. So yeah, I said it could impact profitability and as well just impact how we can pay down our high initial investments if we consider to expand.
Again, we're thinking about our balance sheet. We're thinking if we go and buy these assets, will we be able to pay them back, and how does COVID connect to it? This is what I'm looking for in your analysis. I'm looking for the connections to your balance sheet, to your income statement, to the idea of being able to pay it back, to the idea of the risk factors. I don't get any of that from reading the case. That is your opinions. That is how you get an A on this exam. How you get a C on this exam is if you're just repeating the case over and over. And let me tell you, there are way too many C-level exams, because I read the exam and I'm like, I wrote this case, I'm reading your analysis, and it's like I'm just reading a summary of what I already read. If that's what your previous analysis looks like, needs to be beefed up, needs to be fixed a bit. Now, let's take a pause for a second, and I'm going to show you a few industry analysis that a few people sent me, and I'm going to highlight the things that I liked and a few things of where I'd like to see improvement. This over here to me looks fantastic. It's easy to understand, it's laid out, the person's using various jot notes, they split up the case facts in the part below. If I open up an exam like this, my life's gonna be a little bit easier. It's not all on top of each other. The analysis, it's well laid out. And notice that there's like one line of case fact, and then like 3 lines, 4 lines of analysis. That's what I'm looking for here. It's well laid out, it's organized. I think in this part here, the case fact is maybe like overstated. I don't think you need to talk so much about the case facts in points 1 and 2. But this is an exam that I know it's going to be easy to follow what's going on. This over here is also pretty well laid out, but notice the spacing. Notice how when I look at this, it's very nice font, by the way, like a million times better than my handwriting. But it's all on top of each other. When I open this up, I'm just like not given as much room to breathe as when I even see this. And even this, I think, could have a bit more space. Because you got to remember, your prof is reading like 200 of these things. The easier it is for them to read it, the easier it is for them to understand what you're doing, the higher your grades are. I think both of these examples could have a bit more spacing. But if I look at this one on the right, it's almost it's a lot more case facts. The amount of case fact to analysis is almost identical. Whereas if I compare it to the one on the left, it's more analysis overall. That's what we're looking for, is focusing on that analysis piece. Any questions about the industry, or does that all make sense? So I'll write it in the chat, but I think your 3 takeaways from that are: connect to your goals, connect to your financial statements, mainly thinking about your revenues, expenses, assets, liabilities, or equity. And the last would be connect to your decision. I think we're starting to see, once you're starting to implement those ideas, how you're starting to write analysis, that it's a lot more comprehensive. I think as each one of you said, I asked you, how could you continue that point? That's when you know that you've fully written a proper analysis, is that you can't go any further. So Zaina, I think your example was great. You did a really good job. You got to the like A- level, we'll say. But to go that extra step, I would love to see you connect it back to your income statement, back to the expenses, and that's an expense that we have very little control over. Very helpful to know. If you're dealing in any industry that's a commodity, you're probably gonna have that issue. I don't know if any of you guys follow the global coffee market, but coffee prices are about to skyrocket because it was a terrible growing year last year. These things have very big implications and we want to start talking about them. All right, good stuff. Competitors, what can we say about our competitors? I want you to start implementing the feedback that I've given to the people so far in your analysis. Let's start with the biggest competitor. We'll go one at a time. So let's start with Mark Anthony Wine and Spirits. Or actually, even before that, Andrew Peller. Let's talk about Andrew Peller for a second. All right, what's going on with Andrew Peller, Rock?
I can't really read my writing fully because I wrote quite a bit, but like basically I mentioned that the case fact is that like
Wait, sorry, did you say I can't really read my writing?
a little bit, yeah.
All right, Rock. Who knows Rock better than anyone else in this world? Probably you. If you can't read your handwriting, do you think I'm going to be able to read your handwriting?
No, not really.
And that's something that's a little bit difficult. I don't know exactly what the solution is for that, but I think you might have to take a bit more time. So I want you to be cautious of that because I would say about 5 to 10% of exams I used to read were very difficult. And if I can't read it, it's hard to do it. But regardless, keep going.
I said like the case fact is that they had 488 million market cap, so and they're able to distribute large popular brands nationally. And then my analysis was that they don't have like intimacy and personalization, which just allows us to like compete and differentiate ourselves because we offer a wine but a more holistic experience, which is something that attracts a lot of people and then would separate ourselves from tourists because many people visit wineries on like multiple on a daily basis, multiple like on one day. And then I mentioned that this aligns with the goal of like having like more joy in the wine industry and providing like a differential experience that people don't get. And then like additionally I put a sub bullet point saying this can provide more loyalty and kind of like comfort in people, and then might support like long-term client growth and retention overall because we have a more unique experience and it's people know each other there.
I love it. And I want to highlight a few things in specific that I liked of your answer. You got specific about how big they are. You literally said they have a market cap of like 500 million. Now I know the scale of the size of that competitor. You also said that they have much stronger like production and distribution. Are we going to be able to offer a cheaper wine than Andrew Peller? Absolutely not. However, how can we compete? We can compete with our intimacy, our good experience, and people having a fun time. Based on that, that is making me want to go forward of probably creating a new facility and having those resources available. Quite good, Rock. You got specific with the things. You said, how does it affect us and how can we compete with them? The only thing I got from the case that I read here is that 500 million, they have the distribution and lower costs. Those other ideas are your ideas. That's what we're looking for. Any other points that we want to talk about for Andrew Peller? I have one that I still want to talk about that we haven't discussed yet. Yeah, Vish?
They actually don't have a restaurant, so it looks like they're strictly focusing on just the distribution of wine. So this is kind of supports our idea of adding a new facility with the restaurant so that we can kind of have more of a competitive edge and offer that intimate experience that we kind of prioritize more than them.
Absolutely. And I think what's nice about this is you'll have some points that make you want to do something and other points that will make you not want to do something. That's what a good exam does, is it goes back and forth. In terms of what someone, I think it was Jack, you were talking about COVID, that makes you probably not want to do the restaurant. However, this point here, when we look at what our competitors are doing, that maybe does make me want to do the restaurant. That's kind of the flow of this. Some things go one way, other things go another. In a well-written exam, not everyone should have the same answer. People should have different decisions. The other thing I would like to talk, yeah, Zeta?
It's more so a question, just like on Rock's point. Like he was talking about like how we can like capitalize on like those intimate relationships, and also like the case says that like a reason why Peller was able to succeed is because they were able to capitalize on those lower costs. And so back to like your feedback about trying to relate it back to financial statements, just looking at the statement of earnings, I was looking at the total operating expenses, and even though like they're minimal, we still did decrease our total operating expenses by like 2.7%. So would you say that's something that's worth mentioning?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Right now, when I'm doing the industry, consumer, and competitors, I'm thinking of these things at a high level. I love what you're talking about. I'm going to come back to you when we get to ratios. But to not have too much overlap in the sections, let's hold that until we get to the ratio analysis. But you're absolutely thinking about this in the right way of how can we think about this in terms of our financial statements.
Okay, thanks.
Jess?
How many points would be good to do per section? Like the industry, we gave like 5 points. So is there like a gauge?
Take what the case gives you. In this case, it gives you a decent amount. I would think 3 to 4 points for each of these would be acceptable. And in general, I'll put this in the chat, quality over quantity. I mean, to be honest, I think we can apply that to like everything in life, but same with what you're doing here in this case. I would rather see a few quality points than you just trying to list off like 6 to 10 things. All right, the other thing I wanted to talk about with Andrew Peller is they own their vertical distribution. They have it literally from the point that they're growing the grapes to the point that you buy it in the store. They have what, 100 wine shop locations? That's what you call being fully vertically integrated. They then have a lot more control about who's buying their wines. They keep most of the profit, or literally all the profit. Us, Smith Wines, we don't do that. We probably have to sell it to a distributor at some point. Thus, we have a little less control over the whole distribution channel, whereas Andrew Peller does. And I mean, that's something that would concern me a bit, albeit most of the locations are in Ontario. All right, what about, what's the name of the other competitor? Mark Anthony Wine and Spirits. What do we think about them? Yeah, Jack?
Yeah, I said they're a pretty big threat with their high sales of 1.6 billion, and as well they also have 3 wineries in Kelowna. I also said they have like a wide variety of offerings such as like restaurants, exclusive wineries, and they can target a pretty diverse and large market. So, and then I kind of talked about how SW can compete. I said they must maintain that in-person experience for that like kind of personalized experience, but also have a strong presence online to show their sales aren't like cannibalized through the lack of presence and relying too heavily on word of mouth, because they also had some high reviews on online websites.
Fantastic. We're thinking of like, not only what does this company do well, but based on what they do well, how can we do well as a result too? And so I think you had a few good things there, Jack. I think you got specific with the other company that their sales are in the billions of dollars. Now I'm a little bit more concerned about that. You also talked about the idea that they have different market offerings. They have different groups of wineries for different people. Not every winery is the same. And then you lastly connected it to how can we compete with them? Well, we have to have that online presence as well, because they have quite a strong online presence. I think one thing I would like to see you add in your answer there, Jack, is of their wineries that they have, which one do you think is the biggest competition? Based on what I read, it's probably Mission Hill or Cedar Creek, as Martin's Lane is a much more premium offering, and we're probably not so concerned about it. Has anyone been to Kelowna? Has anyone been to any of these wineries? No one's been to Kelowna? Say, put yes in the chat if you've been to Kelowna. Or to any of these wineries. Few people. Carson, what's it like? Can you just paint us a picture so we like kind of know what we're talking about here?
I mean, I was pretty young, but I went to Cedar Creek and it was pretty nice. Like it's like I don't know, open fields. Like there's a lot of people just like walking around the fields. Like it's very open. Like I don't know. It was nice. I was young, so I can't really paint really a good picture, but that's all I
So
can remember.
you weren't crushing some glasses of wine?
No, just my parents.
All right, I think you got to go back, Carson, and have a few glasses of wine. It's pretty nice. Georgia and Ava?
We've both been quite a few times and we really like it there.
I think I've been to Mission Hill. I remember being on like the patio, like just at like I think it was like a restaurant. That's why I don't know if it was it, but yeah, it was really nice.
It's beautiful. It's like probably one of the nicest places in Canada I've ever been. You know, you have all these wineries everywhere. There's like the huge lake. You kind of just hop on a bike and bike from one winery to the next. Carson, if you weren't 10 years old, maybe that bike ride starts to become a little bit harder as the day goes by. But it's a nice place. Like you go to multiple wineries in a day, so you're competing with these other guys as well. Martin's Lane is like particularly beautiful. All right, what about the local wineries? What's going on there? Do we see these as a big competitor, as a small competitor? What are some points that we can think about for the local wineries? I don't want to cold call people because I feel like I shouldn't have this as like an actual class, but I kind of do want to cold call people. So someone give me an idea about the local wineries that's name is not Jack, Jess, Zaina, Vish, or Rock. Your name is one of those, but I'll still take it. Zaina?
So within the Kelowna region, it says that there's over 120 like smaller local wineries, and a big like reason for their success is a lot of tourists rely on like word of mouth and like online reviews and those kind of things. So based on that, I would say if it's possible, I would advise our company to maybe dedicate a small portion towards some sort of marketing budget in order to kind of like combat that like word of mouth and already online presence that some of these other local wineries have to compete with them.
Absolutely. How can we compete with them? And what I'm getting from this is like competition is hard. Like we've got a lot of competitors. Seems like offering a very good experience is one of the most core things we need to do. This is all leaning me towards going with building the new facility because you have to remember right now they're operating out of their own home. Albeit it is a beautiful home, but it's still, you know, there's not that like, it's not as professional as if they had their own standalone facility. So each time we're doing this, we're getting more ideas. We're kind of going like one direction or another as we start to read it. When I read the industry, I was like, I don't know if I'm feeling so hot about this. When I read the competitors, I'm like, you know, maybe we can compete with them. Maybe there are a few ways that we could do it. Dom?
I have a quick question. Could we say, because for local wineries, their like annual revenues were around 744,000. I like looked at our income statement and ours is pretty much double. Could you say that as like analysis, which kind of like proves that we're in like a stronger position, for example?
100%. I would hold some of these more specifics until we get to the ratio and statement of cash flows. Like fantastic point, Dom. Zaina, I think you made a point similar a few minutes ago. I love these points, but let's wait until we get to the actual like financial going to the specifics to get at some of those ideas, but those are absolutely comparison points that we want to make. All right, customers. What's going on with our customers, guys? Yeah, Rock, start us off. Maybe don't try to like cover everything in customers, but just like one main idea and the implications.
Yeah, like my first point, I made a statement about the young social make up the lowest percentage of sales. I basically said like this would not be a good choice to target as they make up the lowest percentage of revenue, which means they aren't receptive to our products being offered. So if we choose, it would be difficult to meet like long-term goals of facility expansion. And like if we did it, like and that was our target market, the expansion wouldn't necessarily be like economically worth in that sense. And that like we wouldn't receive the revenue to be sustainable moving forward at that point if they're our main target audience.
Yeah, no, you're talking about the young socials, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like a very minor percentage. It's like less than 5% of sales. We're probably not so concerned about them. I mean, I think they can help with our overall good vibes, but they're not going to be what's driving our profitability. Anish?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I also added that like they're not only they're lower volume, but they're like super price sensitive, and we can't really compete on price as much. And then all the stuff that we put into quality and experience are just like wasted because they're like less worried about quality and like they need it to be like low price to buy it. So
Exactly. They're not our target market. They might help us with the idea of being a less pretentious winery and to just have like an overall fun experience. But in terms of our income statement and our revenues, they're not going to be driving our revenues. Dom?
Different point is that the enthusiastic adventurers were probably our like primary like target market, and because they favor that like social settings at restaurants, it makes the addition of the restaurant alongside the new expansion very attractive and like to continue growing sales.
Absolutely. It was Georgia that earlier was talking about of like sitting out on the patio, having some food, looking over the beautiful winery. That's something that provides that long lasting experience. She was literally able to kind of like paint the picture, however many like months or years later that is. All right. And what about the last group, the mature sophisticated? Yeah, Bish?
They're the least price sensitive and they're kind of experts in like drinking wine and things. But I don't know if this is a point to bring up, but I noticed that the average purchase price for them I think was $45, but the most expensive wine that we offer is $69. So maybe we should be focusing more on kind of marketing our more expensive wines since they're our only target group that's going to actually buy them.
Fantastic. Now you're making a good connection between what our customers are looking for and what the products we offer. When I just read the case, I don't necessarily get that idea. That's what I'm looking for you to do is kind of add those additional things of like, how can we, attract this market? In general, I think we can all agree that the enthusiastic adventurers is who we're mainly trying to target. That's our main function. To be honest, customers was like kind of obvious in this scenario here. I don't think there was like a lot of really good in-depth analysis we could make. In industry, I think there was a lot of good in-depth analysis that we can make. Take what the case gives you. Going back to that earlier question, I think it was Jess that asked this. If it gives you stuff to write 5 points of analysis, write 5 points of analysis. If in your customers, you can only think of 2 things to write, only write 2 things. You don't have to try to make something out of nothing. Dom?
Could you hypothetically say like the mature sophisticated might be very important if we were to expand it just in case we had to like up our prices, or would that be too much of a reach?
Absolutely, but I think you'd want to be cautious about that you're not doing it too much, because I don't know if they fully fit our energy that we're trying to create of having like a fun, not too pretentious idea or like winery. So I think it's a group that you still need to like try to service them and have products for it, but I don't think you're trying to like fully model your business off of them because it might not be exactly who you're looking for. Yeah, Zaina?
This is like a question about like the young socials group. I know you said that like it's kind of obvious that we're focusing on the enthusiastic adventurers, but the case tells us that like a key point about why the young socials aren't purchasing is because they feel like they lack the confidence and the knowledge. And I thought that maybe with the expansion and actually having like a wine tasting room, like that would encourage young socials to come and learn so that they feel more confident to be able to purchase wine. Or is that a reach?
Absolutely. And I think you can even take it one step further and say, who will these young socials become? They'll probably then become another consumer group that will have more disposable income.
Okay.
I mean, if I make a comparison between myself and you guys are probably the young socials, and I'm probably the enthusiastic adventurer. In a few years, you might then become, I mean, that sounds weird, but you might then become me, but I think you get what I'm saying. Is your customers might progress from one group to another. You guys seem pretty young. You guys seem pretty social. I'd say I'm pretty enthusiastic. I'm pretty adventurous. I think we could kind of make some comparisons like that. All right, corporate capabilities. What's going on here? Who are the founders? Do we like it? Do we not? What's going on? Yeah, Jivan?
In the case, it says that both founders have experience running successful businesses, such as Saks Underwear, and previously they were able to receive debt financing as they got a loan. So I have a lot of confidence in the owners in expanding to like new opportunities because they have the knowledge and they have the necessary financing.
And I think you can even take that one step further, Jivan, and say, based on what they've done in the past, it seems like we could potentially go with equity or debt financing based on their current reputation and experience. What else about the company's corporate capabilities? Remember, it's more than just the people. It's like where they're operating, what assets they have, what resources they have, what human capital they have. Jack?
Yeah, what I said is I kind of put in my consumer, but you can kind of relate it to both, is they're heavily reliant on their direct consumer sales, taking up 60% of their total sales. So you can see that their main priority should be those direct consumer sales. So they must like take it, and as well, there's much higher margins. So this can relate to their goals of growing for the future through their in-person experience where they said people will buy wine after that. And then as well, increasing into that production area, tasting room, and patio can further enhance the experience and then leading to more increased sales and higher margins.
That's perfect. That's literally perfect. You're getting into the sales channels. You're getting into the idea. I was literally about to ask you that follow-up and then you got to it with the higher margin. Is if you can sell direct to consumer, that's pretty ideal because you're keeping all of the profit. It might take more effort than selling like business to business, but from like a contribution perspective, you probably keep more at the end of the day. Georgia and Ava?
So they won 24 awards in 2020, so I feel like this is like a good time for them to grow and expand because they're being recognized.
Absolutely, they have that recognition. It's something that they can use to maybe try to leverage. Definitely something good for them. Where are they currently operating, guys? Like, what do their current operations look like? How much space do they have? What's their capacity? What can we make out of that? Yeah, Alexa?
So it's in the case that they're basically working at 90% capacity because of how popular they have gotten. So I would say that it's definitely like an attractive idea to expand so that I was gonna say, I know that we can't use like our 2025 mind with COVID because I was gonna say that because people like starting to leave their houses and liking to social distance, like potentially having the added space would help with that, but I don't know if I can add that.
I think the social distancing piece is very fair because remember, like 2021 feels like a long time ago. But
Yeah.
like, remember how fucked up the world was, for lack of better words? Is like you need that space. If you wanted to have a proper setting, maybe if we expand now, it'll help with the capacity issues and also help with COVID restrictions if they persist to exist. I think if you're bringing up a point like that, Alexa, you gotta be careful to not, like, again, bring in too much context from today. And so
Okay.
think back to 2021, think back to the social distancing piece. I think that's very valid. But I
Okay.
don't think it would be fair to say, oh yeah, COVID's no worries anymore. Because in June
Yeah.
2021, we didn't necessarily know that.
Okay.
Yeah, great idea. I think the other thing I would add to that point, Alexa, is that they're operating out of their own home right now. They're not just
Oh, yeah.
operating in the middle of nowhere, it's literally their own home. And so as they're trying to gain professionalism, as they're trying to, you know, separate those things, maybe that's also a big pro forward of them building this new facility so that it's not just out of the garage attached to their house.
Okay.
I did go to the winery. I can tell you that it's a fucking beautiful house. It's literally crazy. It's massive. You can look at some pictures after, but in terms of this might all be leading us to wanting to expand. All right. That's what I'm looking for the industry, consumers, competitors, and corporate capabilities. Could everyone maybe, I'm just gonna step out for a second to grab some water and go to the bathroom. Could everyone maybe put in the chat a few things that you learned of how you should be creating that earlier analysis? So just like a few key takeaways in the chat. I'll be back in like 2 minutes and then we'll start ratios of statement of cash flows as well. All right. I'm just gonna read a few of these things that I got in the chat and just kind of add some comments to it. I love it. If it doesn't give you a lot about consumers, don't write a lot. If it gives you a lot about industry, write more. You guys want to be flexible with this. You don't always want to attack it the same way every time. Connecting to financial statements, if there's problems in corporate capabilities, what can we do? Or if we desist with competitors, what can we do to improve? Reading whole case, intro and conclusion first, fantastic. You always want to be making those things of like, how can we compete? What's our competitive advantage, etc. Josh, this one's huge. Don't rewrite the facts from the case. Actually make those connections to make your analysis stronger. I only want to see the connections. If you guys reread your analysis that you did before doing this, and it's mainly case facts, that's something that you gotta correct going forward because you need to make sure that you're writing the main ideas. Jess, I wouldn't say connect everything to goals. I would say connect some things to goals. Kind of tying that, Maddie, connect to the risk factors. Is the risk outside of your control? Make connections to financial statements, absolutely. Abby agreed, need to be tying case facts back to other points such as goals, financials, other parts of the analysis, not just the decision. You want to be connecting to different things. All right, I think we have some good ideas here in terms of how to do this better each time, right? Any questions about the business size up? Please do not spend too much time on this. No, Carson, do not always mention our decision, only sometimes. Otherwise, it becomes too repetitive. You don't want to read a case that every time says, this makes me want to build a facility. This makes me not want to build a facility, only when it's relevant. Should we make a list of KSFs? I think it can be helpful. I think it can be helpful to better understand of how you should be like thinking about it and what we can do to maximize it. So I think, Dom, yes, a list of KSFs can be helpful, and then that can help with your competitive advantage of how to reach that. Can your analysis contradict each other like negative and positives? Absolutely. It should contradict itself sometimes. In some settings, we saw why building a restaurant would be a good idea. In other situations, we saw why building a restaurant might be a bad idea. So that's how you have unbiased analysis, is you're not always saying the same thing. Alexa?
I just had a question about mentioning our decision. So when you do, like, say you're finishing the industry analysis, would you then like write a sentence saying, due to this, like I'm leaning towards, or do you just kind of leave it?
I think you could like add it to the specific points to make it more specific, because one industry analysis might lead you to wanting to build a new facility, whereas another industry analysis might lead you to not wanting to build one. So I think it maybe tie it more to the specific point. But going back to what Jonathan said, don't do that every time, or else it becomes very repetitive.
Okay, thanks.
David, I think as you guys are seeing, I don't really want to use the word always, because when we're saying always, that's not very flexible. So to that question, should we always talk about how the case facts can impact a growth profitability? Not always, just when it's relevant. But in general, you always want to be making a connection to something. It's just not always to growth profitability. Sometimes it's the decision, sometimes it's your competitors, etc. Did anyone try to build a statement of cash flows? Yeah, Alexa, you did? That's okay. That's the beauty of this, is you're gonna make that mistake today and you're never gonna make that mistake again. So that's why I said at the beginning, take the time to flip through your exhibits. Alexa, we can all kind of smile at you for a second, because you probably spent a little bit too much time doing this. And then maybe you got to that exhibit and you're like, oh shit, that was a waste of time. But hey, we can call it good practice with learning how to build a statement of cash flows. And now you know on your exam to flip to the exhibits. Okay, statement of cash flows. This is where we really start getting into the good stuff. Let's go through this in an organized manner. The way I would like to go through this is I would have the following subheadings of my exam. So under operations, I would have net income. And in this case here, I would have working capital, income taxes payable, and then sources and uses from operations. Then I would talk about major sources and uses in general. And then at the very end, we'll talk about matching. So again, guys, just to not be jumping all over, let's go through this in a systematic way. I don't want to just be pulling out numbers randomly. I want to always go through it in this order, so no matter what your case is, you're making sense of it. Operations, net income, what's going on? What do we think? And what ratio would we like to take a look at? In your answers, I would like to see the words source and use of cash, and I would like to hear the specifics as well. Net income, what's going on? Oh, come on. It's literally right there. Jess?
Would it be that our net income seems to be one of our biggest sources of cash on the whole, cash flow statement, and it's also increased, or no, it's decreased.
Yeah, it's increased.
Oh, no, it has increased. It has increased year over year, which is good because we can use this net income cash to finance anything basically. So
Is
it's
this
good.
sustainable, Jessica? Like, do you like to see this trend?
Yeah, obviously you want it to be improving.
Absolutely. This is something fantastic. I think what you could do just to even make it stronger, say it makes sense because the business has been in operation for 6 years, to take it one step further. And I think what I would also like to see is the ratio that we want to look at for that is going to be the vertical analysis to better understand what's driving that profitability. So Jess, if I highlight what I like about your point, you're talking about how it would increase from 2019 to 2020. I think to make it even better, you could get specific, saying it increased by like roughly $45,000. And I think you could also say that it makes sense given how long the business has been operating. Let's take a look at a vertical analysis to really understand what drove that increase. All right. What about depreciation? What might we say for depreciation? In this case, depreciation isn't like a major source, but you can still talk about it. Yeah, Jivan, is that for depreciation or something else?
No, I had a question. My teacher in class said that we don't need to do a vertical analysis for like net income if the business has been profitable, or is that just like in certain situations you should still do a vertical analysis?
That's a good question. And I'm really happy you brought that up because what your teacher in class says will trump everything I say. Because they're the ones marking your exam, not me. Personally, I do a vertical analysis every time. Whether we're profitable or not, I want to see what's driving that profitability. So even if we're doing well, I would still see how could we do better. However, if your teacher says don't do a vertical analysis, not to call out your teacher, I disagree, but they're the ones marking your exam, so always revert back to what they say every time. All right, depreciation, what's going on there? What do we think? Yeah, Jess?
Just a question, hypothetically, if we were to not do a vertical analysis, what other ratio could be applied here?
That's the thing, is a vertical analysis is like all encompassing because it has like your COGS to sales, it has your growth, right? It has like your OPEX to sales, it has like your net income to sales, it has everything. That's why I say do it every time, regardless if you're profitable or not, because you can get a lot of information. But I guess you could choose one of those more specific ones like COGS to sales or OPEX to sales. But I don't know, I always like doing a vertical analysis no matter what. Even like the most profitable companies in the world are doing vertical analysis. Like, you guys see when Meta laid off like 15,000 people this year? That's because they did a vertical analysis and they're like, how can we become more profitable? We fire a bunch of people. So even the most successful companies in the world are doing this all the time. To be honest, depreciation here is like a very minor source of cash. It's not really a driving figure. So if you didn't talk about it, I would have no issues. However, if you did talk about it, maybe you could talk about ROA and talking about are they still efficiently using their assets. But in this case here, their depreciation was like 20,000 and 27,000. It's not what's causing a major change on this. AR is a use of cash of 18,000 and 17,000. What could we maybe say about that? Yeah, Alexis?
Well, usually it means that we're collecting sales pretty quickly from like our customers, which as sales increases, usually AR increases. So I would say it's a positive.
I like part of that. I don't think we can say it's positive yet. Because there's two reasons why AR could be a bigger use of cash. AR could be a bigger use of cash because our sales are increasing, which is one of the reasons. Or it could be a bigger use of cash because it's taking longer to receive payments. I think you're right, Alexis, but we don't know that yet from the statement of cash flows. All we know is that it's a use of cash. Let's take a look at age of AR to answer which of those cases is it. Is it paying fast or paying slower? Or growing with sales?
Okay, got it. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Good point though. That's the right idea. And I liked how you connected back to growing with sales, but we just don't know that yet. So we got to take a look at the age of AR to answer concretely. Inventory. What can we say about inventory? Jack?
Yeah, so our inventory use of cash dropped by, I got 113,000. So it's a little bit, like at the beginning, just looking at it was a little concerning due to our goals of further growing our business. But then I looked at the days of inventory ratio just to see kind of why we dropped our inventory so much. And it was 419, as it mentioned in our ratio analysis. So therefore, you kind of make the implication that we have too much inventory and it's taking a little
Let's come
longer.
back to the actual days in a bit when we get to ratios. Right now, we're just highlighting that it's something that we absolutely want to take a look at to have a better understanding. So to be honest, this part is always a little bit tricky to teach because some people are like, why aren't we answering everything at the same time? And I think when you're thinking about this, it's like we're doing statement of cash flows first to think of what ratios and then getting to the ratios after and fully answering it. So I appreciate the way you're thinking about it, Jack, but let's just try to stay a little bit more like mutually exclusive between the different sections. I think to continue this thought process, you're absolutely going to look at age of AP. If your company has AR, inventory, and accounts payable, this is your working capital. You are going to analyze that every single time that there's working capital. I think you could also say that they have a major source of cash from income taxes payable. That's just an inevitable in life. If you're making money, you got to pay some back to the government later. So it's probably a good thing that they have this, as long as that we have the cash to pay those taxes. All right, what about, so going through this, net income check, working capital check, income taxes payable check, other sources of uses from cash from operations was depreciation. Check. That's how you're going to go through your operations every time. Net income, working capital, and then if there's other major numbers. Any questions about the operations section of statement of cash flows, or does that make sense? Yeah, Alexis?
I just want to double check I have this correct because sometimes I get confused. So like in this, you're kind of just posing questions like this could be concerning. I'm going to look at this ratio and then you're going to like pause, do the ratio analysis and then discuss them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Think of the statement of cash flows as like your dashboard on the car, and it could say like check engine light, low air pressure, engine overheating, whatever. And then when you take it to the mechanic and they actually do a test, that's the ratios. Yeah, Zaina?
Could you please go over inventory again? We said it was a use of cash, and can you just explain what we're looking at and why?
So any number that's negative here is a use of cash. The reason why it's a use of cash is because we have more inventory than the year before. And so the reason why I know it's a use of cash is because it's negative in this year and it's also negative in the following year, which means that we would have, well, in this case, we produced the inventory, so we would have produced more, and it's using up more of our cash to produce the inventory because we haven't sold that inventory yet. I'll give you an example that you can definitely understand. Let's say in your fridge, you have like 1 bottle of wine, and then tonight you go to the LCBO and you buy 2 more bottles of wine. That's a use of your cash because you go to the store and buy the wine and you haven't, well, in your case, drank it or sold it yet. That's why it's a use of cash, because you have more wine. All right, after operations, you're then gonna go into other major sources and uses. What are the other major sources and uses on this statement of cash flows? Yeah, Rock?
I was thinking a major source is the shareholder contributions, and I wasn't really sure like what kind of ratios to use, but I was thinking like a debt to equity ratio or something like that.
Absolutely. For these, a debt to equity ratio. Does someone want to keep going on this idea of the due to shareholders and the shareholder contributions? This is where you can show me that you really understand what's going on. Because this is a pretty key point in this case, this idea right here that we're talking about. Yeah, Rock?
Like, are you asking like why you'd want to look at it? Is that your
Or
question?
so, like, what is going on here?
Oh, I was thinking, well, for shareholder contributions, they're the only shareholders, so they're the ones like putting in money here. But then I was thinking, like, it kind of looks like maybe because they're the only shareholders, they might have like kind of maxed out the equity that they can put in, and then if they go to debt, it could be cheaper in that way.
So that's part of it. So I think you're tackling this equity piece here, that they're the shareholders, they're putting money into it. I think we're still can make another connection here. Jess?
Would it be that they're funding each other? Like the due to shareholders is funding the shareholder?
That's exactly what's happening. Can someone really paint this picture? Because I don't think we painted this picture yet. Jess?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Come on, guys. This is an accounting and finance course, and this is like the most crucial idea to finance. What do we think? Take a guess. If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. However, if you're wrong on the exam, it does matter. Yeah, Anish?
Okay, yeah, like is it like I think it's just like canceling each other out, like in the sense that they put in 552,000 as shareholders, and then like the money due to shareholders is that amount plus not exactly plus what was there last year, but like yeah, it's like some other amount. So like, but the main reason is because they just put money into the business.
Absolutely. I think the way you could think about this, Anish, is you're moving money from like your left pocket to your right pocket. Because they used to have a big loan on this called due to shareholders. Who's the shareholders? Jack and Susan. What did they do when they got to the next year? Well, they clearly switched the way that they financed it. They paid back all of the debt that they had on their books with shareholder contributions. Let's take a look at our debt to equity ratios and interest coverage to see how those have changed with that financing decision. This is something that I would think of as like the A-level point that you need to hit in your statement of cash flows here. Because if we're not talking about that, I don't know if it shows me that you fully understand what's going on here. In these cases, it's layered. The net income, this is an easy point to make. This is rather obvious. Think of this as like, in Ivy, they always use the word low-hanging fruit. When it's the apple that's right in front of you, you can obviously pick it, it's right there. The one where you're really getting into what's happening here is looking at this here And again, it's really like they've moved money from their right pocket to their left pocket. They paid back the debt that they owe to themselves with shareholder contributions. That's a good thing. That shows that they have confidence in the business and that they're paying off their debt to themselves. The other thing that I would also expect you to talk about would be these net purchases. These were a major use of cash of roughly $120,000 each year. Same idea, let's look at ROA to see how are we doing with these new assets that we purchased. But that's definitely something. All right, next up, I want to talk about matching. And they're doing different things of their matching in 2019 and 2020. When I think of their matching, I'm looking at how does this number fit with this number that fits with this number. Can someone help me out with just 2019? What did they do with their matching, and do you think it was reasonable? Jack?
Yeah, you can see that they used, or for the majority, they had a negative net cash flow from operations, but as well, they also had a lot of money coming in from the shareholders, which kind of allowed them to make these purchases. And then as well, you can look at the bank loan payable too, that we did pay it off actually, right? Yeah, so that was a use of cash, but you could see that the main kind of thing for this net purchases was our kind of shareholder investment there.
Shareholder debt.
Debt, yeah.
Because when you say the word investment, that makes me think equity.
No.
But yeah, what happens is in 2019 they use their net cash flow from financing to fund their operations and fund their net purchases. Is that sustainable, Jack?
No, you want to have a positive net cash flow from operations, as it's the most sustainable way, and as well you're gonna have to pay off that debt in some way, so you need operations to pay it off.
Absolutely. So it's not a huge concern for me, but it is something I would want to take note of in the future because it's not sustainable. You can't do that every year. You can't always just put in your own money to fund the business. Ashley?
This may be a dumb question, but is due to shareholder the same thing as a shareholder loan, or how is it different?
So that's a very good question. If you're ever confused about something like that, Ashley, let's go look at the balance sheet. And once I go to the balance sheet, I can then have an understanding and notice how due to shareholders is under long-term liabilities. And then when I go and I see that long-term it was 513,000, it was 620,000, and then it was zero. And so then that fully answers my question of what it is. And in this case, due to shareholders is pretty much the same thing as a bank loan, but instead of paying back the bank, you're paying back your shareholders.
Got it, thank you.
So great question though, Ashley. If you're ever confused about something, go to the balance sheet and see what's happening there.
Okay, thanks.
All right, what is the matching that they're doing in 2020? What did they do in their cash flows of 2020 if we're looking at this number, and this number? Yeah, Ashley?
Their main source of cash is cash flow from operations. And like that's directly contributing to their net purchases.
Now, Ashley, I agree with what you said, but when I look at the numbers, I kind of see that. I need you to like paint a picture to me if that seems sustainable, if that seems like good matching, bad matching, like what do you think?
I think good matching.
Why?
Or actually it's bad matching because they're using short-term cash from operations for long-term investments.
I don't want to say the word bad matching because this is like the most sustainable way you could grow your business.
Right.
What you're doing is you're taking the money that you're making from your day-to-day job or day-to-day operations and you're reinvesting that back into the company. Now, are you going to grow the most the way that they did this? No. Because how would this company grow the most? How would this look different if they were really trying to like just go and acquire as many assets as possible? Like what would change here? That's a question for everyone. What do you think, Jivan?
Would they still have more sources of financing? Like
Exactly. So this company that's like going for moderate growth, they're just reinvesting their own profits back into the company. That's sustainable. That's like, Jivan, you made $20,000 in your job last year in profit after expenses, and you go and put like a down payment on a house with a friend. That's a responsible way of managing your money. However, Jivan, is that going to allow you to buy 2 or 3 houses? Definitely not. To buy 2 or 3 houses, you would have to go to the bank and have them supplement that financing as well. So the matching in 2020 is perfectly acceptable, but it's not going to have them be their highest growth. The highest growth would be if net cash flow from financing was also a source of cash. All right. Any questions about the statement of cash flows, or does that make sense? Yeah, Jess.
Can you just repeat how like you're supposed to match, like, I guess short term with short term, long term with long term, like that's a rule of thumb? Or like here where I guess operations, like that is short term. So why is it like good in the sense that we're still matching it with long term like investing activities?
That's a good question, because again, the reason I love statement of cash flows is it's always different, and that might make you guys like it or not like it as much. It depends on the stage of the company. I'll do a really quick example to just highlight this. You guys are all university students. I'm gonna guess you have a use of cash in your operations and a use of cash in your investing, because you probably spend more money than you make when you're at university, and well, you're investing in your tuition. Where does that money come from? Well, it has to come from financing. I'm guessing for most people on this call, it's either coming from like an OSAP loan, or maybe your parents or grandparents or something. This is perfectly okay matching given your age and stage as university students. I can guarantee you, if my statement of cash flows looks the same as that, that is not okay. I don't have some magic person in my life that I can just go and get money from. So this matching has to change as you work through different stages. What mine would look like is I have a source of cash from my operations. I have a use of cash in investing. And well, it depends what I'm trying to do depending on my financing. If I was trying to buy a house, this would also be a source of cash. However, if I had a bunch of loans that I had to pay off, maybe from school or something, this would be a use of cash, and I would be matching my operations, something like this. It all depends on the stage, the age, and what you're trying to do. And so I think when we're thinking of matching, you really got to kind of apply the context of what's going on to properly answer. Does that answer your question, Jess, or do you have a follow-up?
No, I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anish?
Do we ever look into like AR and AP to see if they're like really unbalanced at all, and like that affects like our decision in this?
Absolutely, and I think that's probably a point that we could add on the matching here is, what do you think when this is the use of cash, this is the use of cash, and so is this? What do you think, Anish?
It's not ideal for the long term.
It's not ideal, man. It's like if I use an example with you, Anish, it's like you're my customer and you don't pay me back. And then on the flip side, my landlord's also knocking on my door every day being like, hey, Raphael, you got to pay for your rent. And maybe last year I paid him in a month and now he wants me to pay sooner. I'm getting squeezed at both ends in this scenario here. This is something that's absolutely concerning. However, we still do have a major source of cash of 160,000, which was primarily driven by our net income. So it is a bit concerning, but I'm not like raising the alarm bells yet. Yeah, David?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, should we only compare like ballpark all the net cash flows, like the investing, financing, operations, or do you want us to go within and look at matching within operations as well?
I think if you're really trying to excel, you can do both. You can look at the difference of uses and sources of cash between operations, financing, investing. I think going back to what Anish said there too, is you can also do it with the working capital of inventory, AP, and AR, because they're telling you a bit of different stories. The matching of working capital is showing you how you're using like your short-term sources and uses. However, when you're looking at the three sections all together, the operations, the financing, the investing, that's looking at the company's more like long-term vision of what they're trying to do.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, really good questions, guys. Statement of cash flows, I mean, for this course is like somewhat important, but in your future finance courses is like one of the most important things out there. So my question is, before we move on to ratios, do we feel like we all have a good understanding of what's going on here? Or are there any remaining questions about the statement of cash flows? Maybe you could give me like a thumbs up or thumbs down. Yeah, Carson, is that a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. The inventory there, they're both a use of cash in both years, but since the number is less of a negative in the second year, does that mean we're like purchasing less inventory? Is that all that means?
It means like last week you bought $100 in groceries and this week you bought another $50 in groceries. You're still buying more groceries, but overall you bought a less amount relative to the year before.
I see. Okay.
All right, let's move on to ratios. In general, maybe you could just send me like a private message or something. How is the flow? Am I doing a good job of like explaining each thing? Am I going a little bit too fast, a little bit too slow? Help me out a little bit, because we still got ratios and then the other stuff tomorrow to go through. Yeah, Zaina?
There's one last question about the AP. So it's like significantly lower. Is that because our like biggest spending was we spent more on inventory, even though we like had a higher net income? AP goes down because we're probably spending that cash on inventory?
I don't think we know yet, because I think you would expect those things to be working together. Because naturally speaking is if you have more inventory, you also have to pay back more in terms of your payables. So I think what I'm highlighting here is that like I want to see a look at all of the days to really get an idea of what's going on. Because if my inventory is going up, I would also expect my AP to go up to balance it out. Whereas this is like kind of going the opposite way. It's like I purchased more inventory and I paid back my payables back, or like I paid more of my payables back, which I'm a little bit confused why.
So like at this point, we just say that like we want to look into it by like looking at like agent inventory and stuff like that, but we don't know what's
Exactly.
going on yet.
Exactly. Rock, on some of the key component areas you want us to hit on, could you go a little slower? Absolutely. This is where I need your guys' feedback because, I mean, I know this case, I wrote it, like I know what makes sense and doesn't to me. But when I'm explaining to you guys, that's where I need you to give me a little bit of feedback saying like, okay, this is good. Okay, can you give me more examples? Could you write it in the chat, whatever it is. This session is for all of you to feel the most prepared for that exam. So please let me know how I can do it the best possible. Ashley?
I know every case is different and there's no like rule of thumb, but are there some areas of the statement of cash flow that you feel we should always be analyzing besides like the typical like net income, inventory, APAR relationship?
I think if you follow this approach that I have down here, you're gonna hit the main points every time.
Okay.
You're gonna start with
And
operations.
are you gonna send this to us or should I write it down?
Maybe write it down.
Okay.
Or here, why don't I put this in the chat? So what you could think of is you'll always do operations. So for operations, you'll talk about net income, working capital, and then other major sources, other major numbers here. For financing, so operations, net income, working capital, AR, inventory, that. Then major sources and uses of cash. And then matching between matching between operations, financing, and investing. And then also matching of working capital. I mean, the order that you do this, like, if you talked about the matching of working capital and operations, that's also perfectly okay. All right, any other questions? I am so okay keep talking about statement of cash flows, because again, this is one of the most core understandings to finance. So I really want to make sure we're all feeling strong about this before we move forward. Yeah, Jess?
Can you just quickly re-explain the relation between the due to shareholders and the shareholders' contribution? Like
Yes, I think that one we'll talk about in the ratios. I think the ratios will really answer to you what's going on there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. All right, do we all feel like we know how to write a good statement of cash flows analysis for the exam? Talk about the numbers, talk about the sources and uses of cash, tell me why it makes sense or not, and a ratio that will really help answer if we're concerned. Maybe if you guys could all, again, just to help me out a bit, maybe you could write in the chat, like, how close or far were you from the way that I'm going through this? Is the way that you went through this on yourself and the way that you were developing your points, maybe you could use the word close if like you feel like you're generally in the direction I'm going with it. Or maybe you can write the words like, I don't know, needs improvement if you feel like the way that your analysis is way different than the way I'm talking about this. Okay, medium, that's helpful. What else? So again, just like similar just means way more details. Yeah, you could relate goals to this, needs improvement, relatively close, so far pretty good, just small adjustments, nice. Pretty close. Either way, this is good feedback for you, right? If you're pretty close, that means, you know, you're following the right structure, maybe you just need to go a little bit deeper. If you're in the case where it's like needs improvement and you think that what you wrote is very different than what I have, you need to have, you know, a much deeper picture. Like someone just wrote to me, was my analysis was way less comprehensive, but now I feel like I have a much better understanding of the bigger picture. That's what you're trying to do here, is you're trying to get into the details and you're trying to really explain why things are happening. That is the biggest difference between an A-level exam and a C-level exam at any level. All right, now we get to talk about the ratios. You people sent me their work and it looked like they had calculated the ratios. There is zero need to calculate ratios here. It's already all given to you. And within these are the ratios that we can then talk about. So we talked about doing a vertical analysis. Let's discuss that. Again, let's take this one step at a time. We're not going to go through everything. what do we think in terms of their gross profit? Is it getting better or worse? And how can we make sense of just the top items here? I think there's much more complicated things to analyze than what's going on at the top here. Abby, take it away.
It's obviously just gradually like getting a bit more profitable, but that makes sense because as the years go on, the business is going to get more profitable.
Does that sound like an A-level analysis, Abby?
Yeah.
What can we add to that, Abby, do you think?
I don't know. Even though we've been making like slightly more revenue, our costs have also been going up, but it's good to see that our profit is still like raising, even though our costs are going up as well.
Why are our costs going up? Is there something we could tie it back to the case?
Because we're buying more inventory as the years go on.
I think in this case, we could tie it back to the idea that there was a poor growing year. And that poor growing year is what caused our cost of sales to increase. So that's why I say, Abby, like, we want to go a little bit deeper because if we're just looking at the numbers here, like, I can read the numbers and see them. I'm trying to understand what the core reason behind that is. And in this scenario here, the reason why our cost of sales took a big jump from 2018 to 2019 was due to the fact of the poor growing conditions. However, I think we can also make a point here. Notice there's a little footnote here beside cost of sales. And then down at the very bottom, oh, I think I cut it out of my screenshot, but it says cost of sales include the lease vineyards, which was classified as an operating lease. Oh, and what we're about to get to, this is like the really good stuff. Who do we lease those vineyards from? Anish?
Wait, is it not our own property? Like family
Our own property. Can you keep going on that idea, Anish?
I mean, yeah, we directly own it. We're just like paying ourselves. So just like the money isn't really moving. It's just coming out of
from
the
my
business.
left pocket to my right pocket.
Yeah.
Like I can treat it as an expense on this company's statements, which is good because it's going to reduce our taxable income. But in reality, it's not truly an expense. We're just paying a different part of ourselves, which is probably held in a different company. That's where we're really getting into the structure of what's going on here. And once I know that it's just paying ourselves, that looks even better to me because if we weren't paying ourselves, then this cost of sales would even be lesser. What's our biggest expense and what are actually our two biggest expenses and does it make sense or not? What do we think? Is there anyone that I just like haven't heard from today that just wants to give it a try? Yeah, Bish?
I don't know about advertising. I can't remember what the facts were from the case, but for wages and benefits, I'm pretty sure there's a really strong management team and there's a bunch of people and employees working, so it makes sense that that's one of their biggest expenses.
And do you feel like confident? Like, do you have any issue with that that's 20% of sales, or does that make sense to you?
I think that makes sense.
Absolutely. So again, tying it back to who the management team is, and even though the absolute number has increased from roughly 200,000 to 265,000, the percentage just stays the same. So I don't think we're spending too much money on wages. Very good thing. I think you also talked about the other thing I would like to talk about, which is advertising. We saw how heavy competition was in this industry. We know that advertising is something we need to do to get people into the winery. So when I see this, these would be the three that I would talk about. I would be talking about cost of sales, wages and benefits, and advertising and promo. And to be honest, all three of them paint a good picture for me. It makes sense. We're not spending too much in any areas. And all of this has led us to have what we love to see, which is an increasing net income each year. Make sense? So that answers this first part up here, gross margin, profit margin. I think you could compare it to the industry. And in terms of net profit margin, we're doing better because ours is higher, which is obviously a good thing. And then our gross margin is above Andrew Peller, but below the industry, which again, I think makes sense given what's happening, especially when you think that our cost of sales includes the operating lease that's really just going back to ourselves. Yeah, Jivan?
Can we mention that Andrew Peller is not really like a direct competitor and the other competitor is more valuable for information?
Absolutely. That's a really good thing to say because Andrew Peller is such a massive company and they also own the distribution channel from wine stores to the actual producers. So maybe their numbers are a little bit skewed and maybe we actually don't really want to talk about Andrew Peller as much, but we'd rather talk about the industry. Great point. Our return on assets went from 12% to 13.9%. A B-level student is going to say our return on assets went from 12 to 13.9%. This is an increase on our return of assets. We're doing better than the previous year and we're around the industry average. No issues with it, but I haven't got to the good details. To get to the good details, every formula is an X over a Y. For this ratio to increase, well, from 1 year, year one, to year two, something is changing in my X and Y to cause that change. Let's go to our balance sheet and income statement to see why did my net income or why did my return on assets increase? Your Y in this formula is your total assets. Was there a big change in my total assets 2019 to 2020? Not particular. Especially in my total long-term assets, like yeah, this went up by like, I don't know, roughly 100K. And this also went up by like roughly 100K. So our asset base overall has increased. But you gotta think, $400,000 for property, plant, and equipment for a winery is actually quite low. The reason it's quite low is because we lease the vineyard from another company we own. So this company doesn't have a lot of assets, but when we go over here and look at our net income, we see that our net income had a nice positive growth of roughly like $45,000. So I think the point we can make on return on assets is that we're doing a good job managing our assets. We haven't bought too much assets or too many assets. And it looks like the assets that we have invested in and purchased has been helpful overall with our increase in net income. All of this is looking good for me and in the future of maybe us investing in a new facility. All right, someone drive home this point for me with return on equity. Why did return on equity drop from 58% to 17.6%? That's a massive drop. If you need a second, no worries. Take a look at the X and the Y in your formula. Why did my ROE go from 58% to 17.6? Because if I just saw that, I would be highly concerned. Alexa?
Yeah, I could be really wrong, but did they invest more money so then it would have changed the denominator and made it lower or not? I don't know.
It would have changed the denominator and made it higher,
Oh, sorry, yeah, but like made the percentage lower.
but made the percentage lower. Because if you look, the previous 2 years, they had literally no common stock. They had $4 worth. And then this year, now the company's in a better position, they took the debt off their balance sheet and they really had that as shareholder contributions here. So if I saw that return on equity drop from 58% to 17%, normally I'd be very concerned. But as Alexa just said, it makes perfect sense. When we're looking at the equity portion of their balance sheet, they just added $552,000 in shareholder contributions, thus heavily increasing your denominator, and that's why the ratio was caused to drop. So I'm not concerned at all. That's what we're looking to do here, is get into your X and Y's of what's causing that change. Make sense? Good point, Alexa. Good job. Brock?
Are you saying like the X and the Y stuff is kind of like what gets you like that going above and beyond aspect?
Exactly. Because like a student that doesn't really know what these ratios mean will say, oh, our return on equity dropped from 57% to 17%. That's not very good. We're making less money for each dollar of equity that we have. But when you look at the return on equity, our net income increased. The reason the ratio decreased is because we added so much equity, which isn't concerning at all. It's just the company's having the ownership in it. Anish?
So does it really matter where the money's coming from or no? Like, does it matter that like it's from us, or like would it change our analysis if it was from like actual shareholders?
Definitely, because then you're losing control of the company.
Okay.
But in this scenario here, because it's coming from us, it's really them just like restructuring it from debt to equity. It's almost like a convertible debt loan is what happened here. And so in that case, in this scenario, I'm not concerned at all. In another scenario, if these were like random investors, then I might be concerned, being like, hey, this is a family company. It literally has their name in it. But in this scenario here, it makes sense. So we're probably not as concerned. All right, good stuff. For the ratios, is this okay? Are we going at a good speed for this, or do you want me to take some more time? I think I'll take that as good speed. Let's come back to financial strength. Let's do efficiency. What do we think about when we see these? If we could kind of talk about them a bit together between, sorry, one second. Between age of inventory, age of payables, and age of receivables. You also probably want to be thinking about the industry average. Someone tackle age of inventory. Yeah, what do you think, Jess?
I think something I would say is their inventory numbers are way too high, which could indicate that they have way too much inventory just sitting there. And something we learned in class is like when it just sits there, like you're not making money on it, like you could be putting that money somewhere else. So it's kind of just dead to them.
Now, I agree, Jess, but you haven't given me context of how long it's sitting there. Because you told me that it's sitting there a long time, but I don't know how long, and I don't know relative to the industry.
Would it be
Given that feedback, how could you provide more context to me so I really know what's happening?
Would it be because like the wine industry, it takes a really long time, like it's a long process in general, maybe?
Absolutely, but I'm looking for the days in my question.
Oh, so 419.
And what's the industry?
Oh, the industry is only 202, so we're double the industry, meaning it's taking way too long for us to actually sell all our inventory, meaning we're probably not getting enough customers, meaning maybe the expansion would be good because then with the expansion, we'll gain more customers and we'll be able to sell more of our inventory.
That sounds like a more complete picture, right? So you really want to get specific, and you could even go as far as saying we're holding our inventory for over a year. Now, Jess, I think you could tie it back to what is our inventory? Does it go bad?
Like not necessarily. Like it has a long shelf life, I'd assume.
It's wine. It has a long shelf life. Sometimes the value might even be going up if we're having, wines from like a few years ago. So I think when I see this, is the age of inventory a little bit concerning? Yes. But is there a reason that makes sense? Yes. It's a long process. We're still a growing company. We're still trying to figure out our operations, and the inventory's wine. It doesn't go bad from 1 year to the next. However, if this inventory was, I don't know, like some sort of like design or t-shirts, maybe we would be concerned because the style might change or the colors or things like that. But in this scenario here with wine, I'm probably a little bit less concerned. Anish?
So this doesn't mean like this is like completely separate from like when you age wine and you just like let it sit for like years, or is it not? Because like that's why I was a bit confused in what I put in my like how I analyze this, in the sense of like, oh, like we might this just might be the way we do it, and we age it for each one over a year on average.
You could also bring that up because it said earlier in the case that sometimes wines are fermented for like X amount of period and then they could be aged from months to years. And so maybe Smith Wines is creating wines that are older than the industry. And so that could also be what's going on here. Someone wrote a question in the chat. Don't some wine companies age their wine specifically? Could this be the case here? Absolutely. That's where we're really starting to provide context of why I'm not so concerned about this. Maybe not so, but like medium. All right, what's going on with age of payables? Jack?
Yeah, so jumping from 67 days to 27 days of paying off kind of our suppliers, whether it be for like making our wine, that looks pretty good, and you can also maintain a healthy relationship with them, and it's much lower than the industry average, which is very appealing just for the company, and it looks good for them in maintaining relationships. And then as well, you can kind of see it in their cash flow, where you could saw they've paid off a decent amount, and it's not kind of being a big burden on their cash. So it's not like we have a huge accounts payable number that's a source of cash. So we don't need to rely on that too much for our operations too. So it's a healthier and more sustainable for the growth.
I agree, but I also disagree. So when I see it go from 67 to 27 days, I don't particularly love that. Like, our suppliers are gonna like that. They're getting paid faster. But from our company, I'm like, if everyone in the industry pays 2 months later, why are we paying in 1 month? Because that's 1 month of less cash that we have on hand. So yes, the suppliers are probably content when we do this. However, for Smith Wines, I'm like, is this something we need to be doing? Or could we try to maybe push our days and payables a little bit more to be in line with the industry? Because going back to what we talked about earlier with working capital, all three of them were uses of cash this year, which is kind of like you're getting squeezed a little bit at all ends. So, I mean, their numbers are healthy in other settings, so I'm not concerned. But I don't particularly love this trend that I see of our age of payables decreasing when our age of inventory is so significant. I got a question in the chat. Does looking at the inventory turnover ratio help us at all? I personally never do inventory turnover because inventory turnover is the exact same ratio as days of inventory in just different words. So if you had an inventory turnover of 6x, that means you turn over your inventory 6 times a year. That's the same as saying that you have 60 days of inventory. Personally, I find 60 days of inventory much easier to understand than turning your inventory over 6 times in a year. So that's why I always do the days. However, theoretically, both ratios telling you the exact same thing. David?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, if we aren't given ratios, would you say these, whatever 9 or 10 you gave, should be calculated every time? Okay.
Again, I don't like the word every time because you got to apply context to the case.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
But I think in general, this is a very good list, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, age of receivables. What's going on with the age of receivables? And explain to me, given our business model, why it is so low. Alexis?
I might be going out on a limb here, but part of me is just thinking because most of our sales are direct from like us to the customer. So there's really not a lot of time to there's not you're not waiting for customers to come in like shipments or stuff like that, like across the country. Like maybe Andrew Peller would have a different scenario, but our scenario is just different from that.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm looking for in each part of this, because it's telling me that you're going beyond just what the ratio says. And you're explaining it given the business model of how this company works. We make our sales directly to the consumers. They pay us right away. That's why our days of receivables is only 10 days, which is probably our sales that have been done through sold to distributors or maybe directly to restaurants. But in terms of people coming into the winery, they would pay right away. Okay, I think that makes sense for efficiency ratios, right? I think your takeaway for this section is context. Give me context of the situation. Tell me why this makes sense. Tell me why you're not concerned about this. Really paint a picture for a winery that mainly has wine tours and wine tastings and people visiting, why these numbers make sense. Because if we change this from a wine company to a dairy company, these numbers look terrible, horrendous. But as a wine company, these don't concern me at all. I think they actually make a lot of sense. Our total debt to assets and interest coverage. Using that idea of the X and the Y, what is going on? Why is our total debt to assets decreased significantly? And why is our interest coverage as a result increased by over 2-fold? Yeah, Jivan?
I'm not exactly sure about the interest coverage, but the total debt to assets, I think it decreased because we paid ourselves back. So we owe less debt to ourselves, but that doesn't really change much. So I don't think the ratios are really valuable.
So I like part of that answer. Look what our total liabilities has gone from. It's gone from 777,000 to 244,000. Why did it decrease so much? Well, it decreased because we paid back this due to shareholders. So as a result, we're no longer primarily funded by debt. We're actually primarily funded by equity. I think what you could add to that, Javon, to make a stronger point is you could say if this company's looking to get additional financing, because they have so little debt on their books right now, it's about 20% of their assets. A bank will probably look favorably upon this and will be more likely to grant them credit. That's how we can make a connection to our ultimate decision of how we're going to finance it if we want to do it.
Okay, thank you.
What about our interest coverage? What's going on there, guys? Why did our interest coverage increase so much? It's directly related to what we're talking about right now. Yeah, what do you think, Zainab?
It's because we shifted from being like debt funded to equity funded. So we've paid off all our debt. That puts us right now, we're like 3 times the industry standard of interest coverage. And like the higher our number is, the better that looks to banks because they're more likely to know that we can pay back any interest charges. And that sets us up in a really good position for expansion because now that opens up an opportunity for financing.
Perfect. I think you're seeing the difference in, I'm going to use you as an example between the first contribution you gave me today versus that one now. That change is the change that I was hoping to see across everyone as they're sharing their contributions today. That point that you just told me right now really painted a perfect picture. You really got into what was changing on the balance sheet. You then compared it to the industry. You then linked it to what a bank would tell us and to how that affects our ultimate decision. That's what I want every piece of analysis on your exam to look like, because now you're really starting to paint that whole picture. All right, what's going on with the quick ratio and the current ratio? Why is there such a difference? Why is the quick ratio like 0.6 and the current ratio is 5.6? Before we even get into this, guys, what is the difference between quick ratio as a whole and current ratio? Maddie, I see that question. Let's stick around at the end and we'll answer that interest coverage. In general, if you guys have any questions about anything that we've talked about today that I went maybe too fast over, at the end of every session, I always stick around for as long as there's questions and we can answer any specifics that you weren't able to write down. What's the difference between a quick ratio and a current ratio? Maybe you can just write it in the chat or raise your hand. Maybe write it in the chat, because it seems like I get more answers like that. Justin, can you explain that?
Yeah, so the reason why it's so different is because all of our cash is tied up in inventory, which makes our current ratio a lot higher than our quick ratio, which means we can't liquidate that cash as easily.
And how does that compare to the industry, Justin? What do you think?
Like, honestly, it's like a good thing our current ratio is higher than the industry average, but also kind of a bad thing because it also may mean that we have more cash than we should in inventory.
I think I might go more with the bad thing that we might have a lot of cash put up in inventory, because if you look, our current ratio is it's like roughly like 3x the inventory, or sorry, 3x the industry, a little bit higher, which means we got a lot of inventory, but we kind of knew that from before looking at our age of inventory. However, when I look at our current ratio, our quick ratio, the industry's at 1.0 and we're at 0.6. And that concerns me a little bit more, because if we have a lot of current liabilities that are due soon, I'm wondering, are we gonna have enough liquid capital to be able to pay it off? Overall, maybe we could have 3 answers here. The first one could be this, second one could be this, third one could be this. How do we feel about Smith Wine's financial health as a company? Are we smiley face? Are we like somewhere in the middle? Are we sad face? What do we think? And this is maybe a more fun way to do it in the future. I might go like a really big smiley face. These numbers look fantastic to me. Pretty much across the board, they look good. The only thing that I would be like slightly concerned about is that age of inventory. However, given they're still a growing company, they've only been around for 6 years, they're still figuring out their operations, that makes me feel a lot better about things. In terms of their gross margin, their net profit margin, their return on assets, all of that looks great. Their total debt to assets decreased significantly, probably making them more likely to be able to get a loan in the future. And their interest coverage also more than doubled from 1 year to the next, which is also all looking good for the future. I think that's a good amount of content for today. I think today hopefully frames your ideas of how to read the case, how to set yourself up, how to develop your points, and more specifically in the statement of cash flows and the ratios, what we're looking to get out of this. Tomorrow, the plan will be to qualitatively assess the future opportunities. We're then going to go through the numbers of the differentials. We're going to talk about how to write a decision. And then we're also then going to go and do projected statements. How many people have already finished tomorrow's work versus how many people still have some stuff to do? You could just write like finished or I don't know, still have to complete. All right, seems like it's a bit of a mix. If you have not completed the differentials and projected statements, please do that tonight or tomorrow morning. The way this is the most beneficial for you is if you're seeing what mistakes you're making. And truthfully, the people that are participating today are going to be the ones that do the best on the exam because they're all getting feedback about how to make their points better. So tomorrow, that's the game plan. Going to go through the differentials, going to go through the decision and projections. If you have any advice or ways that you think tomorrow could be more productive, feel free to send me a message. I'm more than open to changing things up. Why don't we hear a few key takeaways from different people before we finish today, just so we can think of some things of how to do the best possible in the future. So maybe a bunch of people can put up their hands and just tell me like one key takeaway that you learned from today. Or if no one puts up their hands, then maybe I didn't do a very good job because we didn't learn anything, but I hope that's not the case. Yeah, Rock.
Looking at the numerator and denominator, we're doing ratios and using that for like a explanation of why.
Absolutely. That's what every A+ student does, is they look at the X and the Y and why things are changing. Zaina?
When you're doing the qualitative analysis, your prof already knows case facts, so it doesn't really matter reiterating them. You're supposed to focus on making connections.
Purely focus on the connections. That's where all of your grades are associated. If I read it and I already know it from the case, I'm pretty much putting an X over it because it's not adding to your analysis. Ava?
Something may look bad, like for example, our age of inventory, but it has a lot to do with the context. So taking something and saying, you know, is this good or bad, but does this actually have to do with the business we're operating in or the industry, or just adding further context to it, because it might not necessarily be as bad as you think initially.
Beautiful. Love it. David?
Yeah, just in general, asking the why for pretty much everything.
And keep going with the why. I think you guys saw today, there were a few people that gave me participation and I was like, keep going. I don't think we finished this thought. Once you finish your thought entirely, that's what I'm looking for. Anish?
Yeah, big one was just like how to look through the case in the first place, just making sure that you allocate time to things, and like it's just all variable. Like it all changes depending on like what's there and what you have to do.
That's a big takeaway, is you can't look at every case the same, Anish. Like if we're a tech company versus a wine company, the financial tools that you have to do, like it's gonna change every single time. We can't look at them all the same. Any other questions or key takeaways before we finish? So I like everything that people said. Go into the why, add context, make connections, take your time reading the case so that you properly understand how to do it, and that's all going to lead to much stronger analysis. All right, in that idea of adding context, I'll give you a perfect example. I've been teaching 2257 and this stuff for like a few years now. I've figured out more or less how to do this pretty well. The operations work, it makes sense. And providing that context of having taught this course for 2 years and having tutored it for a few years, knowing that context, like I've sort of figured out how to run these things. On the flip side, some of you guys know this, some of you don't. I've started a business I live in Colombia. I live in Medellin, Colombia. I've started a school here. Here, I have not figured out my operations. I have not figured out what we're doing. My expenses relative to sales are way out of whack right now. I can tell you, for every sale we make, we have like $10 in expenses. It's not even close to profitability. However, adding the context, we're brand new, we've been operating for 1 month. Adding that context, I'm not concerned yet. If it looks the same picture in 6 months from now, I am concerned. I've got to change some things up. On that note, I'm going to benefit from the fact that there's like 40 people on this call and ask if you guys can all help me follow our Instagram account as we're trying to gain legitimacy and have more people. So, some of you guys have already followed this, the people that I know throughout the year, other people have not, but I just put in the chat our Instagram. That's my main focus right now. I've set myself up in Colombia for the next few years. I've made some big investments. I'm literally at the school right now. So hopefully when I open up our Instagram account, maybe I can benefit from a few more people. Oh man, look at this. There's like 15 new people immediately. That's what we call maximizing our target market. If any of you guys come to Colombia, you're more than welcome to come and check out the school. It's hopefully a pretty good space. Any questions before we finish up today, or is that good? Same time tomorrow, noon for you guys, and go through everything else. With that being said, feel free to drop off the call. If you have questions or want to go through anything that didn't make sense, I'll stick around as long as we need to. But really good work. See you everyone tomorrow. We'll keep going through the rest of it. Maddie, interest coverage, yes?
Hi, yes, interest coverage. I do understand the whole like debt to equity and it's how it's switching and how it's affecting us. I'm just confused with the interest coverage.
Could you try to take a guess to explain it to me, and then I'll help you out?
Okay, so we know it's like an increase because we did shift from debt to equity. So from my understanding, we paid off our liabilities technically. So now we have covered our interest, I guess, which is why it's increasing.
Almost.
Okay.
Is because we've shifted from debt financing to equity financing, we now have a lot less debt on our balance sheet.
Yeah.
Our debt on our balance sheet went from 777,000 to 244,000. The way that you calculate interest is your outstanding debt times the percent times like a year. Well, if we have a lot less debt overall, we're gonna have less interest. Because we have less interest, we can now cover our interest more times over. And that's a fantastic thing. That means the bank is going to be more likely to give us a loan in the future.
Okay, perfect. And also follow up, how like likely in the past on this exam have you seen that like they do give us all the numbers on like our ratios?
If I was writing your exam, I would give it to you exactly like I have it here, because I'm like, there's way better stuff I can test than your ability to calculate ratios.
Because I've been having a hard time like picking what exact ratios to use exactly when I'm like going through the comprehensive cases, because it's kind of just like open ballpark.
I think this is a really good list to choose from.
Okay.
Which that's why I specifically gave these ones.
Okay.
Because these are all my favorite ratios. So Maddie, I think you could think of this as almost your like all-encompassing list, and then you choose from these ones based on your case if the ratios aren't given.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you very much.
Good work. Yeah, Georgia and Ava?
Okay, so just for matching, just so I'm clear, so if we're gonna do like operating net cash flow, financing net cash flow, whichever one is a source and the other two are uses, we would like connect those.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, that's correct.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Nice. Ava?
Honestly, my question was on matching exactly, so that actually provided me some clarity. So I think I'm good. Thank you.
Nice. Jess?
I kind of have two questions. They might kind of be long-winded, but my first question is on segment reporting. Like, is there a high likelihood that we would do this? Like, I feel like we barely touched upon it in class, and it's not in any of like the comprehensives, to my knowledge.
I mean, now I'm gonna make myself sound old, but I'm pretty sure when I wrote the 2257 exam, it was on it.
Okay.
So there is a very realistic chance, but going back to today, the reason why you weren't able to do it is I only gave you the breakdown of sales. I did not give you the breakdown of expenses. That was all missing.
Tomorrow, is this something you can like expand a bit about more, like about the process of segment reporting and stuff?
Yeah, how about tomorrow we go through the entire case, and then at the end for like 10-15 minutes, I can do a quick review on cash budget, segment report, and contribution.
Yeah, that would be
great. That you're pretty well prepared for that.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then just my second question is, what signals us that we should do a vertical analysis, that like we should look at it, because pretty much like they might give it to us. And then like do you suggest we should always look at it? Like, is there?
I would say always. Like, this is literally the job of a CFO, is to look at their income statements, see where they're spending their money on expenses, and then make decisions accordingly.
Mhm.
It was someone, Jivon, it might have been you that said your teacher said that you don't have to do it if it's profitable.
Yeah, if the business is profitable, she said don't do a vertical analysis because it's not necessary because they're making a profit. But then if they're not making a profit, then you want to do a vertical analysis to see what's going wrong.
I mean, that's like saying like, oh, I'm already healthy, I'm not gonna try to be healthier. Like, I feel like you could still look at your health habits and still do better even if you're profitable. So I'm not trying to disagree with your teacher here, but I kind of do. Like, I think I would do a vertical analysis every time because, like I said, Facebook is an incredibly profitable company. They could just keep their expenses as is. But if you look, this year they laid off like 10,000 people because they looked through their vertical analysis. They realized their wages and expenses were too high. They're like, we don't need these people. We can replace them with AI. So, not trying to disagree with you, Javon, but in general, I would always do a vertical analysis, no matter if you're profitable or not. Anish?
Oh yeah, also I just asked in the chat like who's the teacher, so just in case it's like, is it Rula? Because like if it's not, just so I know not to do it.
It's Miss Shabir. So
okay, I guess
she's new, man. She doesn't know what she's talking about. No, I'm just kidding.
we're gonna tell her Raphael's like attacking her from
Tell her, what the fuck do you think a CFO does?
I think she said don't do it because like in terms of time it wouldn't be as like important because there's more valuable things to do on the exam. But I was confused as well as why she said like don't do a vertical analysis if you're profitable, because like I don't know, we in that instance we had all the ratios like sorted out. So
Yeah, I think I've stated my opinion on this. I don't need to keep going.
Okay, yeah, sorry. My actual question was, I remember the start we were talking about, like, I just have trouble, like, knowing what we have to do. So, like, I know, okay, so we don't do the segment reporting because we got the breakdown of revenue. We didn't get the breakdown of cost, so we can't do that. For cash budget, we had nothing by month, so we need inflows and outflows of cash by month. And then what was it for contribution and break even that you could give, like, a little like sentence like those other two that like really would just like do a light bulb if we had to do it or not?
I think so. Something like they were wondering on a contribution basis what wine was the best.
Okay.
Or they were wondering how many bottles of wine would they have to sell to cover all their fixed costs, something like that.
Okay.
Zaina?
Could you please go over the quick ratio and current ratio? I don't quite understand what they mean entirely. We didn't really cover them in any of the cases in class.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw that question back out to the people that are still here. Who wants to answer the difference between quick ratio and current, and why are they so different in this scenario here? Jivan, I feel like you have an answer for this, even if you put your hand down.
I know that quick ratio, I think it's your more liquid assets are being compared, and then your current. No wait, no, your current would be your more liquid ones, and then your quick ratio is like the total assets in the business, and actually
The other way around.
it's the other way around. But I had the same question. I don't know the difference. I know one of them's called the acid test, but
Quick ratio and acid test are the same thing.
okay, yeah, but I had the same exact question. So
Jivan, I saw you from last semester, man. You did well in those exams. You should know the difference here.
no, I'm struggling this semester. This one is different.
It's okay. Jess, is that an answer?
Would the difference be in the current ratio? It's taking into account the inventory in the formula. And because our inventory is wine, we've discovered that it doesn't move so fast. So obviously we can't become that liquid with our wine. But then when you take into account the acid test or whatever the name is, it doesn't take into account our inventory. It just takes into everything else. So therefore we can become more liquid when you're not taking into our inventory that doesn't have a high turnover rate.
That sounds like a good answer to me. Does that make sense, Aina?
Yeah, so the current ratio deals with like liquidity and
I mean, they're both kind of liquidity, but your current ratio has inventory. It's just your current assets divided by current liabilities. Whereas your quick ratio or acid test, which are the same thing, takes out the effective inventory and just shows like your actual like cash, AR, and marketable securities. Because those are all pretty much cash. You can sell those immediately.
yeah, but in this case we have to consider inventory because it's wine. Okay.
Exactly.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions before we finish? Yeah, Rock?
Someone asked, kind of mentioned in the chat earlier, but it's something about like how we didn't have to do like certain analysis this time on this case, like segment reporting. So you mentioned like, yeah, we're gonna go through like what you'd want to look for. Tomorrow, did you say that we're gonna go through like, let's say we had to do segment reporting, the things you'd want us to like analyze or touch on in the actual
Yeah. So after tomorrow at the very end, once we go through all of the answers, we can stick around for another 5-10 minutes and go through segment reporting and cash budgeting and what those things are and how you do it. Because they need to have quite specific things given to you. I was a little bit concerned with how many people answered yes to those things today, thinking they had to do it. But that's the purpose of this, is to have that practice.
Yeah, another question I had was like, you know how you mentioned, like in the case, like they specifically told us like they want to protected statements and they wanted to see like, I think it's something about like they want to analyze their past, cash performance and whatnot. In the actual exam, do you think like some of those things are going to be like as obvious, or is that just kind of like how you write it? Like, do you think normally kind of like trip you up and like make you think you might need one analysis versus the other?
Pretty sure with the projected statements in the conclusion, they always say one way or the other, like they felt the need to project the statements or they felt the need that they did not. I always hate the word always, because if it's something different, I don't want to be held accountable. But if you know how to project out a statement, you know that you need very specific information. You need to have your sales growth. You need to have what your cost of goods sold would be next year. You need to have your expected expenses. You need to have what your days of receivables, payables, inventory would be. You would need to have information about if what's the interest rate on the loans. Like, you need to be given a lot of very specific details that are only used for that.
So like basically, if we had to do some sort of like theory analysis, all the info would be presented. Like if we didn't have to do it, you might only have like a half of it or a quarter.
That's why, like, whoever did a segment report today was definitely fitting a circle into a square, because there was not enough information to do it. Same thing with the cash budget. There was just not enough information to do it. All right. Any other questions before we finish up? Yeah, Carson?
I think somebody asked this already, but I just wasn't paying attention when you said it. But it was like, when we have to do a contribution analysis, like, what are some examples that we'd have to look out for it?
I think they would give you a more specific wording, like they were wondering what was the contribution from each product like, or they might say how many units were needed to break even, or they might say they were wondering if they were able to cover their fixed costs, some sort of wording like that. Because I feel like a lot of cases you can do contribution because you just need your selling price and variable costs. But I think they would have to give you some sort of more specific hint. Like you'll see that for your case this week doing DICOR, there's a specific hint that they give you that you have to do it.
Okay. And did contribution analysis and break even kind of go hand in hand, or?
Yeah, definitely go hand in hand.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yeah, Jimon?
For the statement of cash flows, so our accounts receivable was a use and then it got smaller. Does that mean that
It got bigger. It went from 7 days to 10 days.
on the statement of cash flows?
Well, so if you look down here, if you look at our accounts receivable on our balance sheet, it went from 18,000 to 36,000, meaning that's a use of cash.
Okay.
And then when I go up here, I see that our Asia receivables went from 7 days to 10 days. So part of the reason it's a use of cash is because our sales increased. And the other reason is it took people a little bit longer to pay us back. But either way, I'm not concerned about this because 10 days is relatively pretty fast.
So on the statement of cash flows, when it goes from 18,000 to 17,000, what exactly does that mean?
Sorry, do you mean the uses of cash went from 18,000 to 17,000 or what?
Yeah.
That's because in 2018, like if we highlight here it was 0, then it was 18,000. And then it went from 18,000 to 36,000. So that's why the first year was like a negative 18K. And then the next year is like another negative 17K, is because you're selling to your customers who haven't paid you back. That's using up your cash.
Okay, I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
Put it like this, Giovanni. Let's say your roommates owe you $10 right now. That's a use of cash for you of $10 because they haven't paid you back. If next week they owe you $20 in total, that's another use of cash of $10 more of yours because they haven't paid you back. So your use of cash last year would have been 10, and this year would also be 10 because you're looking at the comparison to the previous week, or in this scenario here, to the previous year.
Okay, so in 2020, $17,000 worth of sales is still owed to us, but we haven't received it.
$36,000 of sales is still owed to us, which is $17,000 more than the previous year.
Oh, okay.
That's the way to think about it.
Okay, I get it now. Okay, thank you.
Rob?
This is like a bit more of a general question, but like kind of going back to you, we were doing implications of like the business sides up, and you asked us for like our own contributions to what we thought in each of the different like analysis. If you didn't really give me sort of like so much like suggestions like, yo, like, make sure you kind of change this or make sure you're going deeper into this, that's just kind of like you saying like, yeah, it's for most part like good implications you're coming from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any things we can do tomorrow to make this more efficient, more helpful, more beneficial? Or do you think following the same structure for the most part is good? Grace?
Yeah, I was just gonna say maybe when people are answering the questions, if you could repeat it or like summarize what they said, I would find that really helpful.
Absolutely, can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you. And then also, sorry, I had one other question back to quick versus current ratios. Sorry to keep going back to this, but when we're doing our analysis of like the different, like just with the current ratio, how it decreased from 2019 to 2020, like why did that happen? Like I understand now that it was higher than the quick ratio because it's wine, so the turnover rate is not as fast as it would be if it was like a different product, but I'm just confused, or I don't know why it decreased from 2019 to 2020.
So for that, we got to look at our X's and Y's. So
Okay,
your
right.
current ratio is your current assets divided by your current liabilities.
Okay.
So last year we had 682,000 of current assets, and now we have 769,000.
Right. And then so
Whereas our current liabilities went from 99,000 to 138,000. Essentially, our current liabilities are increasing at a faster rate than our current assets. So that's why we have more current liabilities relative to what we had last year. But either way, I'm not very concerned because we still have way more current assets than current liabilities.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
But in general, you're always looking at the X over the Y and seeing what changed from one year to the next.
Okay. Okay.
Anish?
I mean, yeah, you did it like most of the time, like for this one, but just like in general, like the key takeaways for like every like small section that we have is like really helpful. So
awesome.
That's good. That's good. Like as long as we keep doing that, I'm happy.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's great. I started doing those key takeaways when I started teaching at Western because I realized if we didn't do that, sometimes people leave and don't really know the key things to focus on. So I think that's a great idea is each section, what are the key things to remember? For tomorrow, when I do the numbers, do you guys think it's easier for you to follow if I do it by hand on my iPad or if I do it on my computer in Excel?
I don't know. Personally, I would say on the iPad as long as it's not like crazy messy and we can replicate it.
So I'll show you like when I was prepping the case, it would look kind of something like this.
Yeah, no, it's good because that's like how we would do it, right?
Okay, yeah, sounds good. I'll do it by hand then.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, just in terms of how you've been just presenting all the information, I really like how you do like this.
Sorry, can you talk a little bit louder? It just started raining where I am and the sound's not
No,
amazing.
I like how you did, this is like a level C answer, but then this is how you want to add to get to level A. That's what I really like that.
Okay, that's the biggest thing. I think a lot of people might look at their analysis they did before class and be like, oh, mine was pretty good. Or I'm guessing a few of you are looking back on your analysis and being like, shit, I'm missing a lot of stuff here. That's kind of the purpose where I saw it. And I mean, Zaina, I'm going to use you as an example again because you're here. I think you saw today really the difference between your first participation versus at the very end. That's what you're looking to do in the future things. I think same with you, Vish. You saw kind of the difference of what you're saying at the beginning versus what you're saying at the end. That's why truthfully, if you guys are giving me more of your ideas, you're going to get the most benefit out of this because you're going to actually see tangibly how can you change it going forward. Rock?
I typed my thing in the chat. I don't know if you missed.
You need to speak louder because it is just like fucking coming down right now.
Yeah, I typed my thing in the chat. I don't know if you missed it, but I was just saying like maybe
I can't
saying,
hear a single thing you're saying.
I was saying maybe saying where people go wrong, like commonly what they might think could have been the right answer, and then why what they did isn't the correct thing.
I don't know. I think it's maybe just me, but maybe you could write your question.
Yo, can you hear me? Can you hear me or not?
Yeah.
Anish, I kind of can.
Okay. He just wrote in the chat, but he said like say where people commonly mess up, like, and why people get a certain component wrong a lot.
Maybe say when doing things where people commonly go wrong or okay, yeah, that's helpful. Especially with the numbers, because the stuff today is more like qualitative analysis. But in the future, tomorrow there's way more right and wrong answers with the way that you do it. So I'll definitely go through like what some of the big mistakes people make are. Very good. Yeah, Mila?
Maybe next time if you could also talk about what we could put on our cheat sheet, if you have any suggestions.
Definitely. So at the end of tomorrow, we can talk about a few of those remaining pieces of analysis and how to create your cheat sheet too.
Okay.
Mila, if I forget about that, can you remind me? Because
Yeah,
there's
sure.
a lot of stuff that I'm trying to remember to do. So if I don't, just shoot a message.
Okay, thank you.
All right, really good work, guys. Really good stuff. Hopefully today provides more clarity about how to do your cases, how to go through the work. Tomorrow we'll go through those remaining parts of it. See everyone at noon. If you haven't finished the case, try your best to get the numbers done, and then you'll see what you're getting right and what you're getting wrong. Sounds good? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
See
you.